Mr. Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I am on the call, but have a very, very poor connection, so my video will be off, and I'm going to turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Lee to run the meeting, as I won't be able to do it without my video to see everybody. So Deputy Mayor Lee, please take it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. This meeting of Ajax Council is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I will now call this meeting of Ajax Council to order. We'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home of the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. I'll now ask if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I have moved by Mayor Collier, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford, that the following minutes of previous council meetings be adopted: the regular meeting of February 28, 2022, special meeting of March 11th, 2022, and the closed session meeting of March 11th, 2022. Any questions or comments from council? We will call to vote then. All in favor? Opposed? And that passes. Mr. Clerk, do we have any members of the public for question period?
Mr. Chair, we don't have any questions from members of the public. We did receive 3 pieces of correspondence in relation to notice of motion 9.2, which were separately circulated to council earlier in the day.
Great, thank you. So now we're on point 5, delegations and presentations. I'd like to introduce the presentation on the annual update and presentation to council, Clint Scott, the unit training officer and community development officer for the Para-Marine Search and Rescue. Mr. Scott, are you with us?
I'm with you. Thank you very, very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and councillors and city staff and distinguished guests for the opportunity to present to you this evening. I just wanted to confirm that the slides are visible for you.
Yes, sir. We can see them now.
Amazing. I'm the unit training officer, community development officer for a Para-Marine Search and Rescue, a marine-based search and rescue service operating on Lake Ontario, servicing all of Durham Region waters. As you can see here, we have a strong history of supporting the community over the past 55 years. And most notably in the past couple of years, we have rebranded and made ourselves look a little bit more distinguished with the new orange, gray, and navy blue colors that are out there. Our strategic plan and our 5-year plan continues to focus on the 4 pillars: strengthening the organization through improved communications, developing our crews by instilling a strong nautical knowledge base, and ensuring our SAR readiness, maintaining operational resiliency and agility, and of course, planning for the future and a sustainable future. Over the past couple of years, we've really looked at our brand and revised our vision, mission, and values. And our strong values today, we'd like to focus in on safety, teamwork, and community. We are volunteers that provide excellence in marine search and rescue here in Durham Region, and our mission is dedicated to being ready for what we do for the person in the water. Our board members are made up essentially by Mayor Collier, Regional Councillor Bill McLean, Regional Councillor Rhonda McCahey out of the town of Whitby. We also have other members from various different local businesses and former members as well. We've expanded our board membership to really expand and represent the 3 municipalities over the past couple of years. and added some local community members and businesses to really support the community and increase our presence within the business and residential communities as well. We continue to develop our crews. Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary, which we are a founding member of, requires that we do what's called phase training for all of our new members. Very proud to announce that we are leading the charge in ensuring that all of our members are completed, and we are completing that training. And I don't think we have anybody in the unit that has not at least started that within their first year and are required to finish it within their first 18 months with us. And we usually on average have that done within the first year as well. We work very, very closely, and over the past, we have certainly developed relationships with the fire services in the region, most notably our relationship with Ajax Fire, participating in their fire safety days and so on and so forth. We continue to broaden our relationship with Durham Regional Police, where we are actually embarking on a exercise this year where we are working very, very closely together on some training activities. We continue to expand our relationship and look forward to working with Durham Region Emergency Medical Services, continue our relationship with the Coast Guard vessels, the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, and the Royal Canadian Air Force 424 Squadron, which is the air support for any searches. And so we continue to meet our strategic goals in developing our crews and ensuring SAR readiness by ensuring all of these efforts are put forward. In terms of planning for the future, we're funded in part from an operational standpoint by the region of Durham. We do get some minor capital improvements through local municipal and corporate grants. And a lot of donations in kind from local corporations and companies and private donors. Our mission over the next couple of years is certainly to increase that. And as you can see from this presentation, about 56% of the funds that we are able to raise are spent back within Durham region. So we are, that is a core indicator for us that we want to be able to support the local economy as well, not just raise funds and spend money from that standpoint. This chart over here highlights sort of the SAR readiness and the types of activities and the population growth within the region. As you can see, 2020 and 2021, we saw a significant increase in the number of missions that we responded to on Lake Ontario. We chalk that up to folks not necessarily being able to do much, so they spent time on the water, and that it resulted in an increase in the number of calls that we had. On average, we generally see somewhere between 15 to 17 calls, and in the past couple of years, our call numbers have soared into the mid-30s, so almost double, if not more. If we look at our operational KPI metrics and some of the highlights that we wanted to share with you over the past couple of years, despite the pandemic, we were able to maintain a vessel at a 96-97% state of availability. The only reason it comes out of service and that number dips a little bit is when we need to do some urgent repairs to the vessel. Our volunteer commitment has stayed pretty strong despite the pandemic. Although there were lockdowns and so on and so forth last year, we were still just shy of 5,000 hours in community service to the region of Durham. Of that, that's broken down into actual missions and taskings that we responded to, our patrol hours when we're generally on the water, maintenance hours, training hours, the administrative hours to run the unit, and of course the community development hours where there were unfortunately no events that we could participate in last year. So we definitely see an increased number of calls. as well. And we remain vigilant in responding to emergencies on Lake Ontario. Some of the examples of the missions that we are involved in is an over to sailboat where a single sailor found himself in a little bit of trouble. He was knocked overboard by a rogue wave. The vacant sailboat was discovered near the Rouge River, and we were able to tow that vessel into Bluffers Marina. And after an extensive search, the sailor was found about 27 nautical miles southwest of the Rouge. The most common sort of our events are vessels that run out of fuel, have mechanical issues, hit logs. Last year, we were involved in the inflatable that was blown offshore out of the Oshawa Harbor area, and then smaller vessels, including kite surfers and so on and so forth. So just to give you a quick idea of what we do and how we do it out there as well. This is a map that sort of shows the taskings and missions that we've been involved with over the past 5 years. The two red lines jutting out into the lake highlight our normal operating area in terms of what our service agreement is with Coast Guard Auxiliary. And you can see that we certainly go wherever the Joint Rescue Coordination Center out of Trenton requires us, or where there are vessels in distress. We continue to look at new opportunities. Our vessel was put in service in the mid-90s. We do understand that there is a shelf life for any SAR vessel. And as a result of that, our long-term goal is to look at replacement of the current vessel as needed. And that's sort of a 5-year plan down the road. But we also identify that there are some gaps where we're not able to get because of water depth, and where the fire department can't get to because of cliffs or equipment. So we continue to investigate those opportunities and work with our partners in the fire departments to see how we may be able to address that red line along the waterfront in Durham region as well. So I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to present this evening. That short little video is a quick little highlight of some of the new branding and the new efforts that we are putting forward. And thank you very much for your opportunity to present this evening and for your continued support. And I'll open it up to any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any questions for Para from council? There doesn't seem to be any. Thank you very much. Oh, excuse me, Regional Councilor Crawford.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work that you do in Durham. And I just wondered how this year has been for you. Has there been many rescues at all?
In 2021, we responded to 34 call-outs in the year, which is double what we saw in 2019.
And okay, that's so, of course, I think you even mentioned that. I apologize. So anyway, thank you so much for watching out for us when we're on the water. We really appreciate your presentation, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have Councilor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. And thank you for the work that you do. Just, I just thought of this as Regional Councilor Crawford was talking. How would somebody in case of an emergency contact you? Is it through 911?
Yes, so there are a couple of opportunities for people to reach out to us should they need us on the water. We are tasked by the Joint Rescue Coordination Center out of Trenton. So for boaters who are on the water, the best way to reach out to us is via VHF radio channel 16. Or by dialing on their cell phone at *16. For any individuals on land who may think that they see an emergency happening on water, we highly recommend that they dial 911. And the Ajax Fire Dispatch Center knows how to task us through the Joint Rescue Coordination Center.
Okay, thank you. That's my question, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then again, Mr. Scott, thank you very much. And thank you, Para, for the work you do for our community on the waters.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors and city staff.
Next, we have item 5.2, a presentation by the Ajax regarding the Ajax Business Improvement Area Feasibility Study. With us today, we have Bruce Peaver, lead engagement partner from KPMG. And I think someone else from KPMG, if I'm not mistaken.
My apologies, Councillor. Just trying to get the picture up and going. So it's a pleasure to be here
Thank you.
tonight to present our final report to Council. With me, I have my colleague Sana Malik, and Sana and I will be giving you a brief presentation on our project and the report, at which time we'd be pleased to take any kind of questions from Council. So if we turn the page to page 2. There we go. So we were engaged by the town to complete a detailed business improvement area feasibility study. And it was to review the current service delivery of the 2 BIAs in the town and try and map an appropriate path forward. The overall objectives of the study were to, 1, obtain a complete understanding of the operations of the town's BIAs. 2, review the BIA's ability to deliver appropriate return on investment for their members in the town. 3, determine whether the BIAs are effective and operating at an appropriate professional standard. Number 4, provide recommendations on the future of the BIAs. That is, should they continue to operate or be dissolved. And finally, develop an actionable plan or roadmap with the appropriate next steps in accordance with the Municipal Act. So the drivers behind this engagement were that the town wanted an objective determination on whether the town's BIAs were operating effectively and at appropriate professional standards in accordance with acceptable standards of good governance, while also delivering appropriate return on investment to both their members and the town. So we were asked to identify potential go-forward options along with a recommendation on the preferred option and a roadmap for implementation. If we turn the page. So we began work in November. On this slide, you can see the different phases of work. In December and January, we conducted an environmental scan where we looked at other BIAs in the province. And then in January, we considered different opportunities for the BIAs in the town of Ajax. And finally, in February and March, we prepared the final report and fine-tuned it with town staff. So that was the work that was conducted over the last several months. And now if you turn the page again, my colleague Sana Malik is going to take you through the 2 options that we came to in our report.
Sure.
Sana?
All right, thanks, Bruce. Thanks for the introduction. If you turn the page, like Bruce mentioned, I'll take you through the options that we developed based on the work that we completed. So based on the interviews with the stakeholders, our survey feedback that we circulated to the BIA community, the governance analysis that we independently completed, and benchmarking, where we reached out to the different BIAs in the province, we identified two different options. So the first option was for the town to maintain and monitor the BIAs for a trial period. And the second option was to dissolve the two BIAs, and the town absorbs the responsibilities and executes a business engagement strategy. For both the BIAs, what we did was we evaluated the options against a defined criteria, which was established in coordination with the project team, the town's project team. So we looked at the governance and administration, the return on investment for the businesses. We looked at the business engagement and advocacy for the area. We looked at the beautification efforts that would involve for both options. And we also looked at the area promotion. If you go to the next slide, so the first option we had, so the first option was to maintain and monitor BIAs for the trial period. On this slide, what we show you is the SWOT analysis, which is where we looked at the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of this option. In this option, the BIAs would continue the current operations. The town would work with the BIAs to develop a set of metrics and service delivery measurements for the BIA to be evaluated against throughout a 3-year trial period. The town would monitor the BIA's ability to perform against these metrics, and based on their performance, they would decide whether they want to maintain the BIA or to dissolve it in the future. If you go to the next slide, the second option, we did the same kind of analysis. We looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the option was to dissolve the BIAs, and the town absorbs the responsibilities of the BIA and executes a business engagement strategy. And following the dissolution of the BIAs, the town would determine the appropriate business engagement plan going forward. This engagement plan would provide an avenue for the town to engage with each of the BIA districts for input. And the town would simultaneously determine the activities they want to absorb. They would absorb the BIA's assets and liabilities, and they would continue normal operations with the additional workload and with the same staffing complement. So those were the two options. If you go to the next slide, and based on the project team's assessment, utilizing the evaluation criteria that I had mentioned previously, it was determined that dissolving the BIAs and the town absorbing the responsibilities and executing a business engagement strategy was a preferred option for the town. If you go to the next slide, in terms of next steps, on this slide, we present an implementation roadmap. And the way we're presenting it is in 2 phases. The first phase is the actual dissolution of the BIA, where the BIAs will cease operations. The council will repeal the bylaw, and the town would assume all assets and liabilities. The second phase would be the business engagement part, where the town would determine the business engagement plan. They will assess which BIA responsibilities they can undertake, and then continue operations as planned. So that was our last slide. And I know we have provided a elaborate report, and I just want to thank everybody who participated in the project, especially the town staff and the council members who spoke to us and provided their feedback and input. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malik, Mr. Peaver, for your presentation. We do have questions from council on the presentation. First, we have Councillor Tyler Morin, followed by Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Lee, and thank you for this presentation. It's very important to us, and particularly important to us in Ward 1 as we have the Pickering Village BIA. Can you just, I don't know if this is the time for me to say other things, but at this point, can you please, through you, Deputy Mayor, to the delegates, reconfirm how many people you interviewed, emailed, connected with? Do you have that figure?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, perhaps I can have Sana dig that number up.
I don't, if you don't have it, it's okay.
We do have it, I'm sure. Sana?
Yeah, sure. So we interviewed the town leadership, the council, and the staff, and that was a total of 13 interviews. We interviewed representatives from the downtown BIAs, including the chairperson, the treasurer, the secretary, and the director. And for the Pickering Village BIA, we interviewed the chairperson, the secretary, and 3 board directors. We also launched an online public survey for all members of the downtown and the Pickering Village BIAs. For the downtown BIA, we sent the survey to 67 members, and there was a response of 13%. And for the Pickering Village, we sent it to 81 members, and there was a response rate of 32%.
Thank you so much. I'll leave it there for now. Deputy Mayor, and I'll have more to say. Thank you.
And we'll bring the report right after this, after the discussion to the presentation. Councilor Bauer, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Can you provide a sort of a timeline for how the next steps or the next phase would actually play out?
Solomon, do you want to handle that one?
Sure. I think it has to be a bit thought out, Councillor Bauer. We didn't attach timeframes because it all depends on how quickly the council would like to take this forward. But we can certainly work with the town staff after the call to put in some timelines, but what are realistic and feasible for the BIAs.
Okay, thank you. And have you gone through this exercise with other BIAs where they've dissolved and you've created a business engagement strategy? And how did that go?
We actually, as part of our benchmarking with other comparator BIAs, we found that the BIAs that did take this approach of having an engagement plan, they were successful and it worked out well for them. And that's why we thought that this was important for the town to consider. The BIAs that did not do this had to face some challenges in the process, where they decided to pursue dissolving the BIA without an engagement plan. Hence, it's important to have the business equally engaged, and we made sure that that's reflected in our options.
Okay, and I'm guessing that as part of developing this engagement study, it would involve, members from the town and as well as members from the BIA. Is that right?
I think that would be dependent on which members the town would like to keep engaged in the process.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for answering my questions. That's it for me right now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you again to the KPMG team for the presentation. Clerk, we're actually going to bring up item 7.4.3, I believe, and we'll just deal with that just right now. So moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Regional Councillor Dyes. The recommendations are 1, that Ajax Council endorse option 2 as recommended by KPMG in the business improvement area feasibility study. 2, that a bylaw to dissolve the downtown Ajax and Pickering Village business improvement areas be approved at the March 28, 2022 meeting of council. 3, that staff be directed to perform all necessary administrative functions to conclude the business of the BIAs and assume their assets and liabilities in accordance with Section 214 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended. And 4, that staff be directed to develop and implement a business engagement strategy for those businesses within the former BIA districts and report back to a future meeting of council or the appropriate standing committee with information and status updates on the engagement strategy. Do we have any questions, comments regarding this? Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you so much. So in regards to the Pickering Village especially, when I was engaged in this process, I tried to look through the lens of the businesses, and the businesses that are paying property tax, the businesses that are paying business tax, and the businesses that are paying the levy, and what they were getting. And it was really something that, I was very concerned with, because I don't think that it was going as well as it could be going. But with that said, it was what it was. And there were still things that the BIA was providing, such as Christmas in the Village, supporting events, and also beautification. So I just want to ensure moving forward, I don't know through you, Mr. Chair, if we could speak to operations, because I think beautification and Christmas in the Village would fall under that umbrella. And I just want to ensure moving forward, in addition to having economic development, working with businesses and our continued commitment, Regional Councilor Councilor Crawford and I, commitment to the businesses on an everyday basis. But could my long-winded question here is, could maybe Director Meredith speak to that as far as the Christmas in the Village? And
I think it would actually go to Director Romanowski, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it Director Meredith?
Through the chair, it's probably appropriate that I answer that question with respect to,
please,
the operational impact. Councillor Tyler Morin, as we discussed, I think it was earlier last week, the town, as you're aware, assumed the Christmas in the Village sort of operating model that will be sort of the town's responsibility sort of as we move forward from an operating budget perspective. So that level of service change was approved through the budget process this past year and is in effect currently. With respect to the general grounds maintenance or the beautification, as you've referenced, there really will be no change from a service delivery perspective. The town currently delivers the services relating to grounds maintenance, whether it's litter collection, garbage collection in the waste bins, weeding, street sweeping, grass cutting, all of those types of things. The only item that we really don't have is the hanging baskets, which we had historically provided, but it was something that was removed from our levels of service a number of years ago. But other than that, there'd really be no impact or change from the town operations perspective.
Okay, so if I may rebuttal, Mr. Chair, is that okay?
Please.
So just to confirm though, the beautification of the village is something that you're going to be able to add to your work plan, Director Meredith, or something along those lines. I don't mean to try and paint you in a corner, but just want to make sure, like the flower pots on the ground, the large urns, that kind of thing. Is that something that we need to look at to add to the work plan for operations in the coming seasons?
We would look to continue with the current level of services that we provide. So that would include the planting of the planters that do exist along Old Kingston Road.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's great. Just wanted to maybe make a quick comment and then I'll stop. I just want to make sure that the businesses in the village know that, you know, quote unquote, we're still here for them and always will be. And, you know, let's make it better than it's ever been. And maybe on the other side of this, there might one day be a steering committee. I don't know, but I think it'd be nice to just clean things up and assume some responsibilities and alleviate the levy and yeah, just move forward. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any of the members of council like to speak on this? We have Councillor Bauer and then Regional Councillor Crawford after that.
Thank you, Chair. So Director Meredith, I'll just ask that the info you provided to Councillor Tyler Morin about the level of service remaining the same for the Pickering Village area will also apply to downtown. If the BI, that the service levels will remain the same.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And I think that Mr. Sawchuk, when we talked about the community improvement, I think was one of the things he was working on as well for adding those types of things like planters and things that aren't currently in the downtown BIA. That's just a comment, not a question. But I guess, you know, it's a difficult spot because it's not for lack of desire, willingness by the members of the BIA currently that I sit with, that they, you know, it's that they really have the best interest of the BIA at heart. But it is an issue as long as I've been on the BIA, and I'm sure previous members will confirm that getting that membership, getting that commitment, getting those volunteers, the time and effort that's involved is huge. And that's on top of, you know, these business owners working hard to run their businesses and run their families. So I guess my question, and I think downtown BIA, it's a very unique situation because it's kind of felt like that the weight of knowing that the downtown core one day will be developed or redeveloped. So we're not putting a lot of time, effort, money, passion into the area right now because it's going to change. I think that's been a huge weight on the BIA members currently, like, feeling like the forgotten sibling or the ugly duckling. So if the BIAs were to dissolve now, I guess my question would be, down the road when redevelopment happens, would there be an opportunity maybe to bring this kind of work back, or try it again and see if it would work again? Is that an option?
I believe Mr. Tumasi, I believe, might be the appropriate person to answer that. So Samuel Tumasi is our Manager of Economic Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Chair, members of council. Yeah, it is possible if and when the downtown does get redeveloped and there is more of an appetite to bring the BIAs back. It is possible to bring that back.
Okay. And it would be similar to a council resolution, just to bring it back?
It would be very similar to our council resolution. I think I'm probably speaking out of turn. I'll probably lend it over to my colleagues at the clerk's office, and they'll probably let you know the legalities on how to bring it back.
Thank you.
Director Cooper, do you want to ask? Do you want to respond on the procedurally, if that's possible?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll just offer a few comments. The process to bring about a BIA is more complicated than just a council decision. There are more processes involved as prescribed under the Municipal Act. And I don't want to get too much into the details of that tonight because I haven't brushed up on it in a while, but suffice to say, it is much more complex than just a decision of council. If I could offer just a few more comments on sort of the desirability of that, because you had alluded to it, Councillor Bauer, I just thought it might be useful to provide just a bit of historical context on BIAs that sort of goes to some of the points that you were making, Councillor Bauer, about the difficulty of this legislative framework for a group of volunteers who are very busy running their own businesses. And so many of you may know that BIAs came about in the 1970s. That was when the enabling legislation came in. And even in the era of its creation, the framework for BIAs could certainly be described as cumbersome and heavy on bureaucracy at best, even at that time. And that's become increasingly true since that time. And really, the reason for this is because BIAs are considered local boards under the Municipal Act, and that comes with a broad range of obligations that befall them that are sort of questionable utility and sometimes just don't make a lot of sense in the context of a BIA. And these would be things that many of you have encountered in sitting on these boards. So just, to give you a few examples that you've probably encountered, obligations for codes of conduct, the whole integrity commissioner regime, the long list of mandatory policies that they're required to have that are sort of questionable utility as it relates to BIAs. And then just adding to that all the administration associated with this type of governance. So budgets, agendas, minutes, AGMs. And that's a lot to keep on top of. And it's a lot to ask of any board, let alone a collection of volunteers that are, again, very busy running their own businesses. So I think when you think about the future of BIAs and Ajax, you want to think about whether that legislative framework is the best model for business engagement going forward. My personal thought is that there may just be better ways for businesses to work together and to beautify their community and advocate for their interests and engage with their municipal partners that are sort of free from all the bureaucracy that comes with BIAs. So just something to think about when you think about the future of those areas.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you. I think I'm good now, Chair. No more questions for me.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Regional Councillor Crawford.
My question would be to Mr. Tumasi. I know that the Pickering BIA has sponsored one particular event every single year, and I'm just wondering if the decision is to be made to dissolve that, what would happen in that particular case?
Thank you, Regional Councilor. What would happen, or sort of that through the chair to Regional Councilor, what would happen to that, I'm thinking you're referring to Jam Fest, right? Yeah. So what would happen is the municipality still sponsors Jam Fest and would most likely probably do the same. And I'm not thinking that there's any sort of change through this dissolvement of the BIA.
To be honest, I'm not sure how much the businesses liked it, but I know the neighborhood certainly did love it. So it would be a shame to see it not continue, but thank you very much.
Yep, no problem.
Do any other members of council wish to comment? We have Councillor Khan, and then afterwards we'll go back to Councillor Tyler Moore and Councillor Bauer. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. My name is on that. I moved it, and I want to tell you what enticed me to move it, because in any case, the town is going to take care of the beautification, right? But this gives these businesses an opportunity to work with our town, with the town of Ajax and the Economical Development Group. I have worked, and I can personally attest, I have worked with the Ajax Business Group, with the business development through the Ajax Pickering Board of Trade. And along with my peers, I can personally attest of the success rate working. And we have a group with Samuel, we have Mina, we've got Samantha Patterson. We have a very strong group from the Board of Trade that I'm sure that will create lots of programs like Regional Councilor Crawford. You know, we did the Up Next Ajax through the town. These are things that are very, very successful. And if our economic development team can focus on nurturing, mentoring, and supporting these businesses, I think the success rate can be very, very high. I am living proof of that. I've worked with them, and I'm excited to see this move forward, right? This is just another organization hampering and slowing things down. Come in, let the town take care of you. We've got a proven track record. So I'm proud to endorse this and move this forward. And we hired a very experienced team to do the investigation. So then that's why I choose to endorse it. So thank you. No questions.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Dyes, do you have any comments or questions? Please go ahead then.
Thank you. This is a difficult one because our community has had these two BIAs for some time. And I know I've been on both of them over the years, and they do struggle. They struggle finding the volunteers, the business owners who have the time to belong to the board. And it is cumbersome with respect to, you know, agendas and minutes and notifications of meetings, that kind of thing. So it's really struggled over the years, and it still does. And once you do have some great leaders, I have to say, that are on these boards, and, you know, they do their best. For many years, they have taken it on and done their best to make this work. But we really need to look at a different system of how we can work with the businesses in these areas. I think that's the main, I guess my main issue. It's an outdated kind of organization, and I think we need to think differently and do things differently. And I think this will make it more successful and open up the lines of communication between the businesses and the towns. So I think I'm willing to try that, because we've tried everything else. We've had great support from town staff over the years, and it's been very difficult. So the levy too, the levy's been a difficult one to overcome, even though it wasn't extremely, large in size, depending on the property. It was a minimal levy, but, raising a levy was difficult for the business owners on the BIA to do, just like it's difficult for us when we raise taxes, and we live here too. So it's kind of that scenario. So there were all these competing things that it just didn't function as well as it could have. And I think a new opportunity may give it new life. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Going to a second round of questions, Councillor Tyler Moore.
Really appreciate you letting me back in, Chair. I just wanted to say generally, at the risk of sounding like, this is already done, because it isn't. We still have to have a vote on this. But I wanted to say thank you to everyone who ever participated on these BIAs for the last 30 years. It must be hundreds of people. And somebody stepped up. A lot of people didn't step up. A lot of people didn't buy in. But I know personally, with my 4 years on the BIA, everyone there was great, did their absolute best. Some people were on it, came back in, took time off, and everybody, like Joanne said, well said. Sorry, Regional Councillor Dice said, well said. I think everybody's intentions were best. I do think it's a culture of the entrepreneurial spirit hitting the wall of governance and the corporate culture, because when you have a small business and you run it, like Councillor Khan and I, they're both small business owners. Anyway, I don't want to say too much, but I do want to say thank you to every single person that ever stood there and came to the meeting after a 12-hour day, or I've seen some people on meetings that are still at work flipping burgers. So thank you to every single one of them. And thank you, Chair, for letting me back in.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer, do you want to have another question or comment?
Thank you, Chair. And I echo the comments of my colleagues. And I also would like to thank wholeheartedly the members of the BIA, Downtown BIA, who do put their heart and soul into what they do every day, business, BIA, and otherwise. My question would be, what is the communication plan after we vote, and regardless of the outcome, what's the plan to let the BIAs know what's happening?
I believe that would go to Mr. Tomasi.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Bauer. The communication plan would be the town staff would send both BIAs, both Pickering Village and Downtown BIAs, a letter just letting them know what council's decision is. And then we will place the communication on our website. And we will hopefully, once we place it on our website and then the communication goes to the board members, we would hopefully help to, if any phone calls or any emails come through, economic development will lead that point and help to explain the situation.
Okay. And in that communication would be, if it's dissolved, there would be notes on the next step about a business engagement strategy and some sort of tentative timeline, or?
That's correct. So there will be some next steps forward in terms of what the business engagement strategy would look like, and how to get involved in the business engagement strategy, and how to get in contact with economic development. So economic development could hopefully help in both BIAs or BIA districts, I would say.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
That's it for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So with no further questions or comments, then we will call to vote then. And I think in this case, it'd be appropriate for a recorded vote, clerk.
Thank you. On the motion, in favor or opposed, Councillor Tyler Morin.
Favor.
Councillor Bauer.
In favor?
Mayor Collier. Okay, Mayor Collier may have a bad connection right now. Councillor Crawford.
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dyes.
In favor.
Councillor Khan.
In favor.
And finally, Deputy Mayor Lee.
In favor. Oh, so Mayor Collier just texted saying he was in favor, but I don't think you can you accept that from me, clerk?
I think we can accept that, yes.
Okay, thank you. So yes, that passes unanimously. Thank you, council, and thank you again to the KPMG team for the report. Don't feel the need to stick around beyond this. So going back up to the agenda, we have item 5.3, a presentation regarding the environmental sustainability projects and programs. The status update from Cameron Richardson, our supervisor of environmental sustainability and climate change. Mr. Richardson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen here and let me know if you have any issues at all viewing it. You should be seeing it there.
We can see the presentation.
Perfect, thank you. As mentioned, my name is Cameron Richardson. I'm the Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change with the Town of Ajax. Tonight and with this presentation, I'll just be giving a general overview of my entire portfolio and work plan to do with environmental sustainability and climate change. I'll give specific focus to the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan and the implementation of that plan. And then I'll talk about some of the other projects I have underway that fall under the themes of energy, waste, education, and outreach. And I'll give an update on an assessment we started last year known as Canada Target 1, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end. This presentation really has two purposes tonight. It has an associated staff report, which provides an update on various projects and programs that fall within the environmental sustainability portfolio. The second purpose of tonight is to provide a detailed biennial update on the implementation progress of the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan. As part of that plan, when it was approved in 2019, we did commit to providing an update once every 2 years. So this is that first biennial update. It's important to note, though, that the projects and programs listed under these general categories here and on this slide is not an exhaustive list of the sustainability related initiatives that are undertaken by the town of Ajax. There's several other initiatives that are being led by other departments across the town. For example, urban forest initiatives, stormwater infrastructure, active transportation and green fleet procurement, natural and green infrastructure projects like permeable paving and facility energy retrofits, just to name a few. But those are all led by other departments and other staff members at the town. So I'm really going to be trying to focus on the projects that are led within planning and development services and my portfolio. So to start, I want to focus on providing the first biennial implementation progress report on the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan. This plan was approved in June of 2019 and provides a strategic framework to address current and future climate change risks in the town of Ajax. That plan has an associated implementation strategy that identified 50 individual action items across 8 broader objectives. You'll see in attachment 1 of the staff report that I've provided a lot more detailed information on each individual action item. So please feel free to follow along as I move through each of the 8 objectives. Objective 1 is for town residents, priority populations, and businesses are communicated with about emergency preparedness and have access to emergency resources and information. Some of the early accomplishments that help us achieve this objective are listed here. We launched new website content in 2021 that's specific to flooding and extreme weather preparedness, and that's targeted to homeowners and residents in town of Ajax. And that's all housed on our environmental sustainability website and is consistent with other emergency information provided by both the Region of Durham and Ajax Fire. In late 2020, as we were experiencing restrictions, we shifted a partnership with Durham Region and the other local area municipalities to host climate change webinars. And those were supposed to be in person, but shifted to virtual events, and they were very well attended, and it was really geared towards teaching community members and residents how they can prepare for future climate change impacts, and with a specific focus on homeowners and renters. Town staff, including myself, are currently participating on the Flood Risk in Durham Working Group, and this is a region-wide working group that is looking to characterize flood risk across the region, as well as communicate that risk and emergency response to the public. So that working group in June of this year will be launching a fulsome website on flood risk across Durham Region. And that website will hold very detailed information and targeted communications for priority neighborhoods that were identified based on some of this flood risk mapping and social vulnerability mapping. The working group is also focused on producing GIS-based mapping of both riverine and urban flooding risk across Durham Region. And that will specifically be used by municipal staff across the region to help address flood risk early on in projects. So it's going to be GIS mapping available to all staff when they're working on capital projects, development proposals, and so on. Objective 2 of the plan is that existing and future critical and social infrastructure is adapted to withstand the impacts of climate change. So really speaks to resilient infrastructure. Some of the early accomplishments towards achieving Objective 2. Town of Ajax is supporting the development and launch of the Durham Greener Homes program in just a matter of weeks. This program is being led by the region of Durham and is a very large retrofit program targeted towards existing buildings across Durham region. So we'll be hearing more about this program in the coming weeks as it's launched. So I won't be focusing on it too much tonight, but it's an incredible program that took a lot of work by Durham staff as well as local area municipality staff. So we're very excited for the launch of this program. Also in 2021, Council approved the corporate asset management plan for core assets, which was one of the action items identified in the plan. And we've also implemented across the town several permeable parking lot installations at the Ajax waterfront that's has approximately 4,400 square meters total. So permeable parking is one of the natural and green infrastructure items that we can implement as a municipality to help build resilience against stormwater runoff and extreme flood events. Objective 3 is that the town has implemented the supporting plans, programs, and policies to manage human health, specifically human health impacts resulting from climate change. Some of the early accomplishments that go towards achieving that objective are that in 2021, Ajax joined the regional local enhancement and appreciation of forest program, the LEAF program. So many of you will know that we've had that program at Town of Ajax for several years. It's a very popular program, but we've now joined the regional program that's being rolled out across every municipality within the region of Durham. So specifically in Town of Ajax, this is a program that provides a subsidy to plant 55 trees per year on private residential property within Town of Ajax. And this program does the entire range of planting. So you have the site consultation, tree selection and delivery, tree planting by program staff, as well as tree maintenance by program staff. So it's a very popular program and we never have any issues planting the 55 trees per year. As well, and I believe you heard at a previous meeting that the draft Recreation and Parks Master Plan will be released this year for consultation, which is one of the large action items identified under Objective 3. And the Ajax SNAP will be initiated in 2022 as well. This will be the first SNAP in Durham. And for those who don't know on the call, the SNAP stands for the Sustainable Neighborhood Action Program. And it's really a neighborhood scale community retrofit and engagement program that involves the community in order to address multiple objectives related to climate change, whether it's stormwater management, water conservation, energy conservation, and natural heritage, et cetera. So this program will be delivered in partnership with the region of Durham and the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. And as of right now, the project team is currently completing an in-depth analysis to select a candidate neighborhood for this SNAP implementation. So it's anticipated that a staff report will be coming later this year that identifies the candidate neighborhood as well as a detailed work plan for this work. So very exciting that we're getting a SNAP program in Durham, and SNAP as a general program is nationally and internationally recognized as a really good climate action program that involves the community in developing the solutions to addressing climate change. Objective 4 is that emergency plans are in place for both transportation and accessibility within the town. We do have several early accomplishments that go towards that objective as well. The emergency conditions report for work policy was revised in 2019, and that's an internal work policy that was identified within our Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan that needed to be updated to ensure that the safety of our staff. As we know, extreme weather conditions, and we've had a few this year and this past winter. So we really want to limit the amount of staff that need to travel during emergency situations like that and poor travel conditions. So that was updated in 2019 to address those concerns and for the safety of our staff. The annual budget process within operations now includes significant flood-related resources, and this includes maintaining a sandbag inventory as well as approving funding for industrial pumping equipment rentals if needed throughout a year. One of the big accomplishments that was achieved last year was that town staff, Durham Region staff, as well as Ajax Fire staff worked with TRCA to finalize the Lower Crothers site-specific emergency response plan. This response plan is an internal document of best practices and internal processes to effectively respond to a flooding event should it occur in the Lower Crothers neighborhood of Ajax. As we all know, that's a flood vulnerable area that's been identified within the town of Ajax. So this document can be utilized by first responders, emergency management staff, conservation authority staff, and Ajax staff to respond to a flood emergency should it happen. In addition, staff and Ajax Fire staff have also on an annual basis review and update the flood contingency manual, which is a public document and essentially is a emergency response plan for all of town of Ajax. So if there were to be a flooding event, this flood contingency manual is something that emergency staff can follow to really effectively address any flooding concerns. Objective 5 is that naturalized urban areas and green up infrastructure within the town are enhanced to be resilient and supportive of biodiversity. Some of the big accomplishments towards this objective are the development of our municipal green standard, known as the Green Development and Environmental Design Guidelines, which will be completed and implemented this year. In fact, these guidelines are coming to the Community Affairs and Planning Committee on April 4th for approval. Another big project that's been initiated this year is the Urban Forest Technical Report that's going to be completed this year, and it will eventually inform the comprehensive update to our urban forest management plan. So this technical report will reassess the structure and function of the urban forest within town of Ajax. This was last completed in 2009, I believe. So there's been significant changes since then across the region and across town of Ajax. For example, we've had some very large wind storms and ice storms that have impacted the urban forest. And since 2009, we've also had the invasion of emerald ash borer, which has absolutely decimated the ash canopy within town of Ajax and the greater Toronto area. So this technical report will really update that assessment of the structure and function of our urban forest. Objective 6 is that natural heritage systems across the town have been protected, restored, and expanded to support biodiversity and improve resiliency. And there's a lot of action items listed under this objective within the plan. Some of those that have been completed in late 2020, we completed the wetland selection, prioritization, inventory, and mapping, which really laid out the potential projects we have located on publicly owned land within town of Ajax to create or enhance wetland habitat. One of the areas identified was at Church and Bailey within the Duffins Creek watershed. And in 2021, as part of the Ontario Wetlands Conservation Partner Program, Ducks Unlimited and TRCA created 1 hectare of wetland within this area. So a massive project that was fully funded by the province of Ontario. One of the other wetlands that you've all heard a lot about within the last year is the Carrison Road Wetland Restoration Project, which we've secured close to $1 million to implement within the town of Ajax. That's an 8.5 hectare restoration site that will be starting next week. So very exciting work happening there. And since January 2019, so since the year that the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan was approved, approximately 20.25 hectares of land has been secured and transferred to public ownership within the town of Ajax for protection and management. So that's approximately 50 acres of land being secured into public ownership. Also, as part of Objective 6, the Invasive Species Awareness Program was launched in 2021, and this has a lot of different action items that fall within that program. But some of the big ones that were implemented was that a dedicated section to our operations employee handbook was added with a goal of training new hires and seasonal staff on how to identify, manage, and report invasive species properly. In 2021, myself, along with some operations staff, completed the Invasive Species Center's Municipal Expenditure Survey. This is a very detailed survey on the impact and costs associated with invasive species across Canadian municipalities. So this can really lay out, current funding towards managing invasive species and the gap that's required to address them efficiently. And lastly, I wanted to mention that the salt management plan is being updated this year, which really lays out best management practices for road salt management within the town of Ajax. As part of that update, we'll be working with our Conservation Authority partners to undertake a salt vulnerable areas assessment this year. That assessment will identify sensitive areas and areas that are more vulnerable to the impacts of road salt, and identify certain mitigation measures we can use to help protect those areas. Objective 7 is that town staff are equipped with improved decision-making tools to identify areas of high vulnerability and risk of flooding and erosion. And within town of Ajax, one of those areas is the Ajax waterfront. So in 2021, we collaborated with CLOCA to complete the shoreline hazard management plan for CLOCA jurisdiction within the town of Ajax. So that's located on the eastern border of Ajax. And right now, engineering staff within planning and development are collaborating with TRCA to complete a shoreline gap analysis for the remaining portion of our waterfront. And that analysis will inform a future shoreline environmental assessment, which will really identify the areas that are at risk of potential flooding and erosion damage, and whether there's any utilities or infrastructure that may be at risk because of those erosion risks. And lastly, objective 8 is that stormwater infrastructure resiliency has been enhanced across areas of known flooding risk. And some of the action items that have been implemented to achieve that objective is that in 2021, we enhanced our environmental sustainability website to promote lot level stormwater management and flood prevention targeted towards homeowners in town of Ajax. Town of Ajax also joined the Unflood Ontario Network, which is a collaborative group that advocates for addressing stormwater management issues using green infrastructure. This year, I helped co-host the Rein It In Student Innovation Competition, which is a Canada-wide competition for university and college students to pitch innovative solutions to stormwater management. We actually have our pitch night later this week, where we will select the winner out of the 8 teams that are participating this year. And one of the big action items that council is well aware of is the completion of the stormwater funding feasibility study, which was endorsed and approved late last year, which will really go a long way in addressing stormwater management infrastructure in the town of Ajax. So in summary, that's a lot of information housed under all of the 8 objectives, but as I mentioned in attachment 1 of the staff report, all of those action items, 50 action items are updated in a lot of detail, and all of the projects that are being completed under each action item. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank the entire town of Ajax team and council across the departments here, just for the collective efforts in pushing this implementation plan forward. Some of these are major projects that were identified, and it really has been a team effort to get many of these implemented and started. So I just wanted to say that at this point. Next, I'm just going to go through some of my other projects that are discussed in the staff report. In terms of energy, as you're well aware, in 2021 through council motion, we updated our corporate and community greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, as well as joined the city's Race to Zero. So this is really setting our targets for emission reductions and identifying ways in which we can achieve those targets. So in terms of corporate GHG emissions, we typically use our energy conservation demand management plan to identify how we are going to achieve those targets. So the last plan was in 2019, and that is mandated to be updated every 5 years. So the next update will come in 2024, where we will incorporate the new corporate GHG targets into that plan and identify how we will achieve those through electrifying our fleet, or doing large scale energy retrofits at our facilities. In terms of community, GHG emissions, that one's a bit trickier to address because it encompasses a lot more different sectors, whether it's transportation or buildings. But we do have a lot of programs that are being developed and implemented currently to address some of these community emissions. One of the big ones for new building stock within Town of Ajax will be that municipal green standard, where we are recommending increased energy performance metrics. For existing buildings in Town of Ajax and across Durham region, the Durham Greener Homes program will really be the strongest way to address some of these emissions, in that we can target energy retrofits at homes that fall within a certain age range that typically emit more GHG emissions annually. And typically that's houses that are built between the 1960s to 1990s that have a larger share of the emissions when we're talking about community GHG greenhouse gases. And obviously the transportation sector is a big emitter of GHGs as well. So we have the Durham Zero Emissions Vehicle Joint Venture Program, which is kind of a comprehensive program that has both education and outreach to try and increase adoption of EVs across Durham region, but also coordinates with all of the local area municipalities in helping to expand our charging infrastructure throughout the entire region. And we were lucky enough to receive some funding last year to install some charging stations at Town Hall. And of course, education and outreach will always be important in addressing community GHG emissions. In terms of waste, within the policy section of planning and development, we're responsible for these two programs, the corporate ban on single-use plastics, as well as the textile diversion program that was launched last year in May. We do have detailed 5-phase action plans for each of these policies and programs. So focus in this year and next year will be obviously to continue implementing those actions. So just as a quick highlight for 2021 accomplishments, for the single-use plastics ban, Town of Ajax staff updated the green event policy and green procurement policy to incorporate new provincial and federal information related to single-use plastics. Staff began drafting competitive bid documents to tender a contract for a vendor of record for compostable serviceware. So to rid ourselves of single-use plastics, and obviously we like to use actual serviceware that can be washed and reused, but the other option will be to use compostable serviceware. So as the state of emergency is lifted due to COVID, we anticipate there may be more in-person meetings or events that may require some of this serviceware. So it'll be important to get that vendor of record. As far as the textile diversion program, the big accomplishment in 2021 was the launch of our textile diversion hub on our website, which really houses all of our education and outreach material, as well as identifies what options there currently are within Town of Ajax to donate textiles or book and schedule at-home pickups for our residents. So we'll continue to build on that website, but we were able to launch that for Waste Diversion Week in Canada in October of last year. So that was a big accomplishment. And for this project, as a reminder, in 2021, Town of Ajax collaborated with TRCA and Ontario Nature as part of the Pathway to Canada Target 1 initiative. So this initiative has the goal of protecting 25% of Canada's lands and inland waters by 2025 and 30% by 2030. And that goal is collectively known as Canada Target 1. But it's important to note that the protection of these land is in order to protect and conserve biodiversity. So these targets are really based on conserving biodiversity across the country. In February of this year, after an in-depth analysis and assessment that was completed by Ontario Nature, we heard and received confirmation from MECP that the Carruthers Creek Wetland Complex was found to meet the national criteria for protected areas. So all of the information related to Carruthers Creek Wetland Complex has been submitted to the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database. So what does this mean? It means that the Carruthers Creek Wetland Complex now counts towards the total percentage area of protected and conserved areas in Canada. So we have a joint media release coming out very soon related to that. It's very good news. And the Crothers Creek wetland complex that we're talking about is approximately 62 hectares and includes the coastal Crothers Marsh, Crothers Creek Forest, and Warbler Woods. So that's all of the area within the Crothers Creek wetland complex located south of Bailey in town of Ajax. In terms of education and outreach across town of Ajax departments, there's on an annual basis a lot of different types of education and outreach occurring, but I just wanted to highlight that the annual Ajax Green Living Days is coming up, and it's kind of the week lead up to Earth Day in April of this year. And we'll see the return of some in-person events as part of Ajax Green Living Days. So we do have operations staff planning a tree planting event at Greenwood Conservation Area. We have the compost giveaway at the operations center happening again. And we have some in-person and virtual workshops being offered on topics such as single-use plastics and at-home gardening. And we'll also be recruiting for the Sunny TOA Eco Team, which is a volunteer team that Ajax residents can apply to and take part in a ton of different environmental initiatives like litter cleanups. It's a very popular program, but we'll be promoting that program as part of Ajax Green Living Days. And with that, collaboration between all departments, other municipalities, and other government partners will be required to ensure that the town proactively mitigates and adapts to the impacts of climate change. And Town of Ajax staff and council will continue to exemplify strong leadership in environmental sustainability. And thank you for having me tonight. And if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson, for that comprehensive environmental report. Do we have any questions or concerns or comments, excuse me, from council? The presentation, Regional Councillor Dyes. Oh. How about this? While Regional Councillor Dyes tries to figure out the tech issues, does any other member of council have any? Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Great report, Cam. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Holy moly, talk about working hard. Can you please tell us, I love Ajax, the SNAP program. So can you give us examples sort of what type of activities would happen? And is it one neighborhood only, or will we add neighborhoods based on success, etc.?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, that's a great question. So the beauty of the SNAP program is that it is formed by the community it's hosted in. So they're brought in early in the process as a stakeholder to really identify what actions they want to focus on, and what's important to that community. So we've seen other SNAPs throughout City of Toronto or Region of Peel where you may see, urban agriculture is one of the things that community wants to focus on. So they may do, garden plots and community vegetable gardening, as well as install some fruit trees like apple trees and pear trees for the community to help harvest. Or you can see things that are focused more on energy retrofits in high density residential buildings. So it really can be formed by the community. Having said that, we do anticipate that some of the programs that we'll focus on within the Ajax SNAP will be to kind of piggyback on the Durham Greener Homes program. So target some energy retrofits within certain areas, stormwater management within Town of Ajax. So using green infrastructure and low impact development like rain gardens, rain barrels, and pollinator gardens that we'll try and pilot. But really it's up to the community when we start working with them to really identify what initiatives are important to them. So we do have some, we kind of had staff provided a very general list of certain neighborhoods that fit criteria that we see need to be addressed within Town of Ajax, and using the in-depth analysis, we'll narrow those down to a manageable neighborhood size within Town of Ajax. And the hope in the future is that this is just the first of many SNAP neighborhoods across Durham region.
Great to hear. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
That's it for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Dyes, were you able to fix your mic?
I'm back.
You're back. Please go
Thank
ahead.
you for your patience. So Cameron, thank you so much for your presentation. I don't know how you do it all. I'm particularly pleased to see that you're involved with other organizations binationally in Canada, around in Ontario, everywhere, really. And I think that's really very important because we learn so much from others. But my question was regarding the emergency preparedness for flooding. So, and I know that fire is in charge of that. I know we're working on a plan, but when we have an emergency of some scale, we are going to have emergency responders going in many different directions. So other municipalities around the lakes have used and trained volunteers to be on site to get those sandbags in place and help with that emergency work. So will that be something we'll be looking at in our response?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, I'll just touch on that briefly, but I believe in town of Ajax, we haven't used volunteers to do that kind of work recently. We would use existing operations staff that could be trained through our internal processes to be redeployed, so to speak, into flood response. But I'm going to pass it over to Fire Chief Lang to see if he has anything to add in terms of that.
Thank you.
Chief Lang, are you on the call?
Yes. Oh, there. Oh, okay. Sorry.
There you are.
Yes, exactly. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that other than we definitely would call in assistance of our neighboring fire departments under our mutual aid if we required some additional assistance. That's already been pre-set up and ready. And there has been talk about using some of the volunteers. The concern will be, it'll be a training issue. So we can certainly look into it further because the town does have a volunteer group and look for something like that. I think the key here is that we're getting the planning completed so that we'll be prepared when it does hit us.
Okay, thank you. And will that also include the residents on Ontario Boulevard, just as sort of a community meeting to inform them as to what will happen and how it will happen, so they feel a little bit more secure in knowing that the plan is in place?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes. Yes, the site-specific response plan as well as the contingency manual does identify roadways that would be inundated first based on water levels. So we can really pinpoint sections of streets and even sometimes right down to the specific household that would be impacted first should water levels rise. In terms of Ontario Boulevard, that would mostly be addressed through the Shoreline Hazard Management Plan that was led by CLOCA. If it's talking about certain erosion risks or flood risks to infrastructure there, then that would come from that Shoreline Hazard Management Plan and not so much from the flood site-specific response plans. I'm not overly involved with that Shoreline Hazard Management work, and that would be more of a question for CLOCA or our engineering group here, but there would be some sort of communication, whether if we knew an event was coming, there would be communication to those households because they've been identified as at-risk households.
Well, thank you. I think it's important to know, though, when we have this plan in place, that we have a plan and that those who are particularly at risk on Ontario know that the town has a plan because we'll be responding to the flood. So I know there's cross jurisdictions there. I just want to make sure that we make sure the residents are comfortable with the knowledge. That's all. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Really quick, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you're aware, I sit on the Durham Region Roundtable for Climate Change, which is a subgroup of works. But I was nominated actually to sit on a smaller subcommittee group to talk about the lands needs assessment group through the lens of the climate roundtable. So we had our first kickoff meeting today. It was talking about gas emissions versus all the different scenarios. So it just occurred to me, have you had a chance to even put any comments in, even, I guess, through your bigger department as in planning, to that particular plan?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, yes, Planning and Development Services will be responding officially to that, and that work is being led by Sean McCullough in policy planning. So he is the one that's been involved with the municipal comprehensive review process. And you are correct in terms of addressing community greenhouse gas emissions. One of the really efficient ways you can address those concerns is through proper land use planning and policy planning. And that's one of the areas we've identified to address community emissions. So, but Sean McCullough is leading that work in terms of the alternative land use scenarios.
Yeah, I've had my meeting with him. It struck me that I should probably have a meeting with you too.
Yes, I'm tied in well with him, but I believe he has a report coming to Community Affairs and Planning on April 4th, I believe.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for your.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler Moran.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this vast presentation, Mr. Richardson. There's so much in there. Very well done. Do you have anything to do with trumpeter swans? Like, does that fall under this umbrella, and wildlife in the waterways and that kind of thing? Because I have a question.
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moran, no, not specifically involved with migratory birds, but that would be a federal or provincial matter. But I know the conservation authorities typically get involved as well, but not from a planning and development.
Okay, we have some residents who are very passionate about trumpeter swans. We all love trumpeter swans, and there's problems with anglers leaving their fishing lines and getting caught up. It doesn't fall into your umbrella. It's a big umbrella you have. I thought it might. I thought I would ask. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler Moran. Any other questions to the presentation? Then I will actually call up the report, item number 7.44, the Environmental Sustainability Projects and Programs Status Update, moved by Councillor Dyes, seconded by Regional Councillor Dyes, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford, that the report on environmental sustainability projects and programs status update be received for information. Any questions on the report? I will just add one very quickly. So Cameron, I had received an email from Evan Wiseman from the Atmospheric Fund regarding just the upward trajectory of GHG emissions that the town is kind of bringing forth. And I was wondering if you're able to, the plans we have, the future plans we are putting in place, you know, you have 9 objectives. Do you feel that we are, as is, do you think it's enough? Were we doing enough to really hit these aggressive targets that we had set earlier last year? Or do you think we need to even be more radical in our approach to, you know, building standards, et cetera?
Thank you, Chair Lee, for that question. I agree. They're very aggressive targets. Even the short-term target is fairly aggressive, and we did see with that community inventory of community emissions in town of Ajax and really across the GTHA that emissions are increasing. We did see a pretty significant dip in emissions when COVID hit, and that was almost entirely due to the lack of vehicle use during early restrictions. And I think that's rebounded to pre-pandemic levels or higher in terms of transportation emissions. So really the big push for addressing some of the short and midterm targets will be EV infrastructure and EV adoption to address the transportation GHG emissions, existing building stock retrofits, which we're supporting the region on their big retrofit program for that. And there's also a national program rolling out for energy retrofits as well. And then for new buildings, the municipal green standards are one of the strongest ways we can address those emissions. And so if you couple those 3 initiatives with land use planning, like we were talking about earlier, then that's really how you can achieve those targets. And I think they all have to be done to even come close to achieving those targets. So they are aggressive targets, but they're realistic and attainable. But I think we just need to keep implementing on the ground and addressing these issues in our day-to-day operations as a corporation, but also throughout the community.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of council when we say we'll be heavily relying on you to ensure that you keep us on track and keep us honest, so to speak. So thank you again. I'll go ahead then and call to the vote then in regards to the report being received information. All in favor? Opposed? And that passes. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Next up for presentation, we have the presentation response to the January 17th, 2022 Winter Storm event. We have Dave Meredith, Director of Operations and Environmental Services. Mr. Meredith.
I'm not sure if I'm going to get the presentation up or clerk if Alex is able to get the presentation up on the screen.
One moment.
May take a minute to download. It's got some video and images. Good. Thank you, Chair. I'm here this evening really to provide an update and a follow-up to the previous council meeting whereby council passed the notice of motion to have some information brought back with respect to the snow event experienced in the town of Ajax, for that matter, across the province of Ontario on January 17th. And before I do get started in terms of going through the details of the event, I just wanted to sort of have council understand the context of the winter storm that we experienced. Can we go to the next slide? So just to setting the storm in context. So across the GTA, municipalities received generally between 48 and 55 centimeters of snow on January 17th. And to set the recorded context, so we can go back into the 30s, 40s, 60s, and 90s, where highs had been, from approximately 40 centimeters to 48.3. So essentially we were dealing with the highest one-day snow accumulation sort of in Ajax on that particular date. So we're really dealing with a significant event that is not something that you can plan for or anticipate sort of on an annual basis. And just before we get into sort of the details of the event, I think it's important to understand the context in which municipalities are expected to respond to winter situations. And the municipalities are essentially governed by provincial regulations regarding minimum maintenance standards for winter events. And essentially what the minimum maintenance standards do is they provide municipalities with a defense against liability from actions that happen or with respect to levels of care taken with respect to roads, sidewalks, bridges, bike lanes, and so forth. So the regulations are really based on classification of roadways and expected reasonable response times in a normal winter situation. So it will deal with snow accumulation, icy conditions, patrol requirements, and so forth for roads, bikeways, and sidewalks. So for example, the majority of sort of response times, as I mentioned, are based on classification of roads, and your general response is anywhere from 6 to essentially 24 hours. So for an arterial road, which may be a class 2 road, you typically respond within a 6-hour period, whereas classifications of roads between 3 and 5 could range between 12 and 24 hours in terms of the response times. So that's sort of the umbrella that municipalities work within and deliver service level objectives to try and meet in terms of the delivery of services. One of the tools that the Municipal Act or the regulation provides or makes available to municipalities is the ability to declare a significant weather event. So here's just a brief sort of excerpt from the regulation whereby it says a weather hazard is approaching or occurring and has the potential to pose a significant danger to the users of the highways they have the authority over. And essentially the second point is the key point. It suspends the standard timelines required for a municipality to meet their winter maintenance objectives. So the timelines that I had mentioned previously based on the road classifications, those timelines are suspended, recognizing that we're not dealing with a typical situation. And the municipality, in our case, the town staff at 9 o'clock on January the 17th in the morning, sort of declared a significant weather event, posted the information on the town's website, and pushed the information out through social media, basically saying that this is going to take an extended period of time for us to respond to. So that, that went out, as I said, on the morning of January 17th. The timelines for the declaration of a significant weather event was consistent with the majority of municipalities within the province of Ontario, those that we followed up within the region of Durham, within the GTA, and across the province, declared this event a significant weather event under the Municipal Act. So next slide. So in addition to the legislative requirements for responding to a winter event, town staff are also governed by another regulation which ties into hours of work. So there's really three key items that are identified here. So drivers can drive a maximum of 30 hours in a 16-hour period. They're legislated to have an 8-hour rest period between shifts. And there's a sliding scale that ensures that staff don't work in excess of 70 hours in a 7-day cycle. So that information is gathered and maintained on a daily basis by every employee. So it's always difficult for some people to understand why people are resting at certain times and sort of how you're managing events. So from a management standpoint, we're always aware of the hours of work, we're aware of minimum maintenance standards, and we're balancing sort of when we call staff into work, the number of hours that they're required to work, when we're required to rest staff, and so forth. So it is a daily occurrence from November 15th to April 15th, which is typically what we deem to be our winter season. So those are our decisions and discussions that are happening between managers, supervisors, team leads on a daily basis throughout every day of that winter period. So there are processes in place to manage all of these things. And it's something that we need to always be aware of. And I should mention that all the processes that we've established, so in terms of the routes that we've identified, how we deliver and respond to services, are all intended to ensure that we're complying with the legislative framework that we are required to work within. So if we go to the next two maps, it's really just to give you, and I know you're not going to be able to see it in great detail, but essentially the town is broken up and divided up into 17 plowing routes. So there's 17 areas for local or secondary roads that are identified. So we've got 11 that are responded to by town staff, 6 are dealt with by contractors. We then also have 5 routes which are deemed to be our mains, which are our collector and arterials, which are supported by our contractors. So we have 2 routes that deal with our arterial roads, 3 routes that deal with collector roads. So those roads are obviously your higher volume roads, everything from Roslyn Road to your collector roads, such as a Clover Ridge, a Williamson, which we would deem to be collector roads. So we've got dedicated 5 dedicated routes that are constantly cycling through those arterial and collector roads. They do have a higher level of service based on the volumes of traffic that they support. So basically we've got those 22 individuals on the road and 22 plows on the road sort of delivering that service. What you can't see below is each of the 17 routes, they do have those are the lane kilometers for each route that are identified. So in order to look at maximizing and ensuring that we have the most efficient routes and that we can meet our service level objectives, they're generally between 16 and 18 kilometers, lane kilometers, that are identified within each of the routes. And I can say when we have the 22 seats filled, that when staff are called in typically at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, that at the end of the day, they should be able to get through the routes and have the have the routes completed. Clearly on the 17th, that was not the case in terms of staff and our contractors being able to get through the routes, and I'll get to that in a moment. If we go to the next slide. So this next slide is just an example of an area, and this area is essentially bounded by Westney Road on the west, Roslyn Road to the south. It's essentially Nottingham. So it's just a sample, or it's a snapshot. And you'll see a number of color codes there. There's a certain tone of blue and red, which are considered our main sidewalks, our main trails, which are typically along arterials. And then the teal and the green are what we would deem to be our secondary sidewalks and our secondary trails. And again, similar to roads, our primaries have higher levels of service. So when a call-in is initiated, we're going to be hitting the main sidewalks and the main trails along our arterial routes, and then spill off into the secondaries within the event itself. So when we're looking at a response, we're looking at the roads, we're looking at our sidewalks and trails. There's just over 40 staff that are required to support that service. We have 10 or 11 staff supporting local roads, 11 contracted staff supporting our road network. We have 4 contractors that support the main sidewalks and trails, and then we have 10 town staff that support secondary sidewalks and trails. We also have 3 winter patrollers that patrol the roads on a 24/7 basis from November 15th to April 15th. So our roads are always being patrolled and monitored to either initiate a call in, respond and deal with customer service related issues, and direct work as required. We also have, for our sidewalks and trails, what we refer to as filler trucks. So as the sidewalk machines are going, there's 1 contractor and 2 staff that are required to have salt. They go around from location to location to ensure that we're constantly filling those sidewalk vehicles. So there's 3 staff that are allocated to filling the sidewalk and trails. In addition to that, we do have, as I mentioned, team lead supervisors and managers that deal with not only the customer service side of things, but stay on top of the oversight of staff. In addition, we have school crossings that are an area that we have to pay attention to. And then once we've responded initially to the winter event, we then initiate the senior snow program. So that is an additional service that is initiated once the snow stopped in 24 hours after the event has ended. So that's just from a resource standpoint. Now I'll just get into a little bit of information of the 17th. If we take the next slide. So with respect to the roads on January 17th, at 3 a.m., our contractors were called in to start to respond to the arterial and collector road network. And they responded and were working on the arterials and collectors from 3 a.m. to 7 p.m. At 7:30 a.m., staff are looking to continue to widen the street. So essentially, we've completed the single pass. So we were getting more into our roads and continue through the 19th and 20th. So it was pretty much a 4-day event to deal with getting the roads into a state where they were, I guess, comfortably drivable. You're able to go in 2 directions and so forth. So continue to initiate a number of cleanup activities with respect to the road network for subsequent days from that time. The next slide is with respect to the winter response sidewalks, trails, parking lots. Obviously on the 17th, We have a contractor that we bring in who deals with our parking lot, so community facilities, town hall, fire hall, a number of locations where our contractors are in dealing with parking lots, staff initiating the sidewalks and trails, and particularly the secondary sidewalks and trails. The volume of snow is extremely challenging with respect to that infrastructure. A lot of the equipment that we have was unable to blow the weight of the snow that had accumulated in many of those locations. We had to resort to using blowers, of which we have 2, to assist in the removal of snow in a number of these areas. We did look and were able to rent some additional blowers. We used our contractors where we could. But at the same time, on the 18th, we did issue a media release to advise that we would require extended time to deliver services relating to our parking lots and trails. So Alex, we're just on the next slide. So with respect to the last point on the slide, the clearings of trails and sidewalks basically continued until January 29th. So it was probably about 12 days after the event before we were able to get to the majority of our sidewalks and trails, at which time we declared an end to a significant weather event. So that was just to sort of put in context the extent, something that we would normally, sort of have 24 hours to respond to within extended for about 10 days past that time frame. And as I mentioned, the road conditions were generally in good shape. I would say they were drivable after 48 hours. They were in better condition after 4 days, I would suggest. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll start to get into just some of the challenges, and I've subcategorized them in a few different areas. So just some of the natural environmental challenges that we faced was the sheer volume of snow, blizzard conditions, and the visibility that the drivers experienced, especially during the first day, and the temperature drop that occurred sort of overnight. With respect to the operational challenges, as I mentioned, the volume of snow accumulation, the lack of snow storage in many areas, which required then the removal of snow. We calculated, I think there was at least 809 dump truck loads of snow that we had to relocate, whether it was off sidewalks, out of cul-de-sacs, where there was limited capacity. So we used a number of our different parking lots in town where we had to physically relocate the snow during this period. So in addition to the volume, it was the sheer weight of the snow, hours of work limitations that I've referenced earlier. On-street parking always presents a problem in these types of situations, and this event was no different. Something that is different that we don't typically experience that had a significant impact was vehicles stuck within the roadways. So although residents were advised to stay at home if at all possible, clearly that was not always the case, and there were a number of vehicles that were within the road network that prevented plows from maneuvering, getting by, staying for a period of time until vehicles were able to be moved out of the roadway. I would say we did have some challenges with the experience of some of the drivers that were employed by our contractors. We've had follow-up discussions with our contractors regarding that. And then something that I've mentioned in the past, especially in Regional Councillor Lee's area and Councillor Khan's area, the roadway design in some of these newer subdivisions. They lack snow storage, they have tighter turns, the roadway design is not as linear. So it does present challenges just because there's constant turns, constant tight turns, which is problematic because there's nowhere to put the snow. So when we look at subdivisions such as Sundial in particular, that is a significant challenge in terms of dealing with this volume of snow. There are some, I don't know if there's solutions, but I think there's some equipment differences that we're looking at in terms of how we might be able to facilitate service delivery in that area. But what I've got is I've got 3 or 4 video clips starting next to provide council a bit of a feel for what sort of, I guess, the drivers were experienced. We do have some dash cam video from our contractors. We're in the process, hopefully over this next year, of having them on all of our vehicles, and I'll get to that in a moment. But hopefully this, it's a little choppy, the video, but you'll see this is just a car that stopped and parked, that's stuck in the middle of, in this case, it's around McGill and Westney Road. So it's not going anywhere. Our plow is not going anywhere. And this was pretty consistent in terms of what you'd see in a number of local roads sort of throughout the town. We can go to the next one, Alex. So this is more of an evening. This one is more showing the volume in terms of, so here you have the plow backing up because it can't push the volume of snow on the street. So it's backing up. It's going to start to move forward. Again, it's got a bit of a delay here. But when you apply this times 22 routes across all the roads in Ajax, in the volume of snow that it's trying to move and how slow they're moving, a lot of the stops and starts that were needed, it takes considerable time to get through all of the routes themselves. I think there's two more, Alex. This is, it's in the Northeast. I believe it's coming along Williamson in Imagination subdivision area, where you'll see that there's, again, another car stuck in the middle of the road. He's shoveling out of the front of his car to try and get his car free in order to move his vehicle. So again, these were, I'm gonna say there's probably hundreds of these that took place sort of amongst the first couple of days that our plow drivers were experiencing. That if you're not out there, you're not realizing, and you're not witnessing or observing. And Alex, I think there's one more, and then this one is that you can see the roads are clearer, but I think you're sensing there's some frustration amongst residents with the amount of snow that they've had to clear over the last several days. And there's a resident that doesn't want any more snow at the end of his driveway. So you'll see he stays there, and then he'll move out into it more with his arms crossed and is not allowing our plow drivers to go by in that situation. So anyways, they get out, they resolve it, but it's, I think, a bit of the sense of frustration that a lot of residents were seeing with, I'm done with the snow at the end of my driveway, and these are some of the situations that our drivers face when they're out on the streets themselves. So just some of the other challenges that we experienced during the event. So our summary of calls, not only to operations, but the calls to switchboard. And this was sort of over a 4-day period from the 17th to the 20th. So operations received 1,452 calls. The calls to switchboard, there was 1,772, 454 emails, 54 requests through My Civic requests, the back and forth through social media. Obviously, lots of engagement with council during this period as well. And I'd say the challenge from a staff perspective that we face is centralized coordination of the information when you have this volume that's flowing. There are calls that would potentially come into switchboard, come into environmental services, go to council, and come in by email, and it's all the same request, right? So you end up having, because it's not consolidated and coordinated, and you sometimes have different information being provided by different people from time to time, that the lack of some form of centralized coordination of information flow proved to be a challenge when we were dealing with volumes such as this. Calls were answered, calls were returned, emails were responded to, again, for the most part, from what I gather. But I do think there are opportunities in terms of how we, whether we go down the path of having a future call center that will deal with and coordinate these types of matters, But from a communication standpoint, I think there is some opportunities in terms of how we convey and communicate information sort of during an event. Just on the side, there were some resource challenges during this time. We did have 6 COVID-related absences, and we do have 3 vacant positions that we are currently filling. So that's 9 bodies within operations that we did not have available to support the time, this time between, I'm essentially saying the 17th and 21st. Technological challenges. One area that was a significant frustration to staff, to members of council, to the general public was the fact that the Track My Plow app was not functional, was misleading, not providing accurate information. It impacted staff, ourselves, in terms of being able to gather and collect GPS data, which we require to respond to residents, to provide information to council. We use that to verify where our plows are, when they're by certain areas, and the service that they're performing. So not having sort of that GPS data and that information is extremely challenging in terms of managing an event such as this. And the last is obviously dealing with these large volumes of snow for all different pieces of equipment. It's over a 3-week period. We got some information, but during this time we had 110 winter maintenance related work orders in the fleet. So that some of it's minor, there was some that didn't involve a lot of downtime. This is just a general accumulation of work orders that dealing with working the equipment as hard as we have. The equipment sometimes says, I need a break, and there's some repairs that are required throughout that time. So there was some downtime for equipment as well, which is something that you would expect in an event such as this. Next slide. So just challenges, just from a service delivery standpoint, the senior snow removal program, we were nowhere near able to support like we would hope or envision. A number of the calls that we did receive that you saw earlier were related to the senior snow program. We were upwards of 10+ days before we got around to all the seniors, based on the number of resources that we had available to deploy to that program. Same with school crossing locations. Those were probably the 2 areas that suffered the most from a service delivery, because what will happen is we always want to make sure that we've got people in the seats to run the plows, to make sure the roads are being cleared, the main sidewalks, the main trails. Those are always going to be the emphasis. And then as you go down the service level continuum, there's eventually you run out of resources. So the areas that were, I guess, compromised from a service delivery standpoint, I've identified here. One of the frustrations from a staff perspective, and it's one of the reasons that we got into a lot of the snow removal, is whether we're dealing with the Harwood Bridge, the Wesley Road sidewalk. We know the volumes when you're along large roads, regional roads, where a plow will come by and clear the roads, they load it onto the sidewalk. Our sidewalk machine goes back down, and you end up with the back and forth between the sidewalk and the road. And the long-term, or the solution is then to physically remove the snow, which we had to do in a number of cases. And I know during the event there was some video that was posted to the website with respect to the process of removing the snow along the Harwood Avenue Bridge, and the length of time and the laborious or the amount of labor required to facilitate that. So that obviously was a significant challenge as well. Next slide. We've only got a couple left, I think. So lesson learned and opportunities, I guess. Believe it or not, first of all, I did want to sort of recognize the investment that council made back in 2020 with respect to winter maintenance. There was a significant investment made in staffing resources. I believe there were 4 additional operators. There were additional contracted services that were approved by council through a business case that allowed both our sidewalks and trails as well as our roads to receive a higher level of service. We would have been in a real predicament if we had not received approval in the 2020 and 2021 budget to increase the resources to support winter maintenance. So that was really a credit to this council and the support provided sort of through the budget process for that. Additionally, and again, approved in this year's capital budget in 2022 was the upgrade to the town's GPS and dash cam technology. So that is a significant project that we expect to see value in, and we're going through the procurement process right now and look to have that technology in place. Hopefully by the end of the year, that's our target, so that we will have better access and better information available on the website, better access of information to staff to provide and make better decisions, and dash cam technology, which will be on all of our equipment, which will be able to look at situations that arise when our staff are in the field. So if there are public safety issues, if there are, matters that require follow-up or require litigation, it's invaluable technology to have. So that's something that we are moving forward in 2022. From a communications standpoint, I think there's opportunities to enhance our public education program. We do have an information program that we start in the beginning of the year. We work with corporate communications on our website. We distribute information in different outlets, whether it's community page, social media, and what have you. And I will give you a sample of what our communication information looks like, but it is something that we do need to look at. Are there other things, and are there other opportunities that we could be exploring to engage the community? Again, from a communication, I talked about consolidating intakes to better manage call volumes and inquiries, and then how we utilize social media and the town's website to disseminate that information. So I think there's a bucket under communication that I know this was an extreme event, but it's something that I do think we've learned from and identified, and we'll continue to look at some enhanced opportunities. I'd mentioned requirement for specialized equipment, especially in the newer developments. And I should say there has been some equipment that was ordered back in 2020 that has still not arrived. So it would have been specifically applied in the Sundial subdivision, because there is, now I'm not saying it would have solved any of the issues or problems necessarily, but it would have allowed us to provide a better service sort of within that neighborhood. And I think there's some other equipment that we have within our forecaster have identified within some of our newer developments to support winter maintenance. Enhanced on-street parking enforcement. It's always been, and I don't recall anything coming back to this council in terms of a more proactive approach to deal with on-street parking. I know we've dealt with this in past councils, and that deals with the potential towing of vehicles. And there's always been a bit of, in the past, some resistance to the town being proactively towing vehicles during a winter event. So it is something that I think is worth revisiting. I know from a staff perspective, it's something in many respects that we would find beneficial, but I understand there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had with respect to that. And the last point here is our collective agreement. Just in speaking to our flexibility in hours of work and or our use of seasonal staff. So we're going through that process right now, and I think there's some improvements that we can look for in terms of working conditions that would assist or help us out in these types of situations as well. Okay, I think there's just the one more slide, which is just, this is an example of what we do convey to residents. So there are tips and reminders that are provided. We talk about the responsibility of homeowners to remove snow and ice from sidewalks adjacent to their homes within 24 hours of a snowfall. Clearing of snow at the end of their driveway is their responsibility. We talk about restricting or eliminating on-street parking, that they're prohibited during plowing and salting events, and making sure that vehicles are not sort of hanging onto the roadway when vehicles go by as well. So there's some messages that we do apply, that we do push to our social media channels. But like I say, those are things that we'll continue to work on as well. So that concludes sort of my presentation and somewhat of an overview of the event and sort of the winter response sort of as a whole. And I just don't want to stress that this was not a normal event. And it is something that you would never, no municipality staffs for or resource for to meet the minimum maintenance standards as it relates to this type of event, which is why there is the provision for municipalities to declare a significant winter event, which is what we did. So I'll turn it over if council has any questions, and I would be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Director Meredith. And you're going to hear this, I'm sure, from all members of council, but thank you to your entire team. We understand this was not an easy thing to literally dig the town out of. And, you know, your staff, you and your staff did a fantastic job. I'm sure there are questions. In fact, why don't we start with Regional Councillor Crawford, followed by Councillor Tyler Moore, and then we'll go from there. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dave, for your report and your summary of yeah, it was just a ridiculous amount of snow that fell. And I do appreciate the response of your staff. I know we overburdened them with emails and text messages, and they were very kind. And we personally watched one of your staff on one of the streets very patiently listen to how he could do his job better. So, you know, so so I really do appreciate the fact that they have a great deal of patience with our residents, and even in their frustration, we're, you know, obviously very respectful to them. So I have to ask this question. Did you say 22 plows?
We have, yes, 17 local road routes and 5 that are dedicated to arterial and collector roads.
Okay, so once the main roads are cleared, I guess it's just not as simple as taking whatever's left over, divide it by 3, and send them out and do the streets in the different wards. Is it not that simple? Like, I know nothing. I am not the smartest person in the room when it comes to snow plowing. But I just wonder, it's not that simple, I guess.
Well, in all honesty, we did that to a large extent. So what would happen is operators that were in, not necessarily our arterials and collectors, they run a certain pattern and cycle, but when they're in a vicinity of an area that may be in need of assistance, would they go in and help? Absolutely. Our other 17 routes, they don't all finish at the exact same time. So I know in particularly on the second day, so on the 18th, where we knew in the northeast part of town that there were certain areas that were struggling in terms of, and our objective was to get everything done with a single pass by the end of the 18th. So when we were still, you know, I was in the area around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the second day, and there was a lot of work to be done. So we have communication with our supervisors and team leads, and areas in South Ajax that were in better shape, that were finishing up towards, you know, sort of mid to late afternoon, they were going out into other locations. I was in the office at 4:30 on the 18th, the second day, and speaking to an operator who had just come in and did his route. He was going to Lakeside to help out in an area that was in need of support. So all our staff were engaged, and where areas were required to have 2 or 3 plows in them, we did, in particularly on that second day. And as we moved forward, we did move staff in and out. So it wasn't as clinical as everyone's saying in their 17 routes. They do move in and support each other as well.
Okay. I guess for me, I have to ask, how do roads get missed? So we had one road that was not plowed for like 5 days. And yet roads all around them seem to be all done once or twice. So it's hard to explain that to a resident. I don't understand it myself.
Yeah, and you know, there were 1 or 2, and I know one of the 2 of the roads that we did communicate back and forth with, and Yeah, one of them was a smaller road that did appear to get missed. There was one that I know when the plow started down that route, they weren't able to get through for whether it was parked cars or what have you. That's what you would find in most of the situations, is you really need to speak to the operator, right? So that's what we would go back to and try and figure out the operator that was in the route, speak to them and talk to them about what their situation was. 5 days I can't explain, right? All roads should have been plowed within 5 days, because I think for the most part, they're within the 3 to 4 day period, just sort of driving out and around, it appeared that the streets were in good shape, but there may have been one-offs that I'm not 100% familiar with, that if they were missed, then I don't know what all of the details would be around that specific scenario.
And it's like 2 months later. The other thing I know was equally as frustrating was, us getting the sidewalks on Westney Highway 2, the main sidewalks cleared, and then the regional trucks coming and filling them in again. I mean, I don't know how you coordinate that. It's just like, what are you doing? Don't fill them in. We just got them clear, and we've got residents on Westney Road trying to get to the Ghostain. That had to have been, if not one of the most frustrating things to happen. It's like, what are you doing? And that, like, they're only doing their job. I get it. We're responsible for sidewalks. They're responsible for the roads, but my word, honestly.
Yeah, and I know just in speaking to our environmental services group, they expressed that same frustration. And that's one of the areas that we did identify, is if there are opportunities from a communication standpoint, it's not an easy answer, because the region will be up and down their regional roads multiple times in a day, where we may only get by that sidewalk once a day. So it's going to be challenging when they're completing their routes that frequently and continuing to move material onto the sidewalks and trail system.
I mean, I don't think that any resident in their wildest dreams thought that 24 hours that this would be done. I mean, you look at the window, you can see that you've got a lot of snow. So no one, I really don't believe that there was any expectation of that kind of speed. You cannot expect the same service with 60 centimeters or 60, whatever it was, centimeters of snow versus 20 or even, 10. So like, I think we all knew that. I think, communication, I guess there were some situations where we could have done a better job in communications. I don't know that this will be a one-off thing. I think that with the way that climate is, I think that this could be, oh my God, I hope it's not normal, but I mean, I don't think we're going to see these 10-year lags between these big storms. And I think that whatever learnings that we can learn in this particular storm, we really should be almost prepared for the worst case scenario next year, so that we're ready to go, whatever those learnings are, have them in place and ready to go for the next storm. Anyway, I don't want to steal this. I think that it was a very interesting winter. It was very interesting, and I learned a lot. And I think there are definitely areas where we can improve, but I just know that you were working as hard as you could and as fast as you could under the circumstances that you had. And so I sincerely appreciate all the work that went into those days and weeks of cleaning up. So thank you to your team.
Thank you, Regional Councilor Crawford. We have Councilor Tyler Martin.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Meredith, Director Meredith, because repeating whatever the people have said, but I have to say the amount of patience that your staff showed was, inspirational to me to do the same thing to our residents who are equally frustrated. And I see that, council requests were in your list of challenges. So it puts it in perspective. Amazing on that point. You mentioned a centralized, a couple of things here, centralized number, which that's always gold, those kind of, direct communications that we can do with residents saying, okay, here's what the link for the plow map, here's the link for the, here's the number you can call. Again, in the back though, when you've already alluded to it, the challenges of those going down are really tough because it's almost worse than not saying anything at all. Because if you push it out there and all of a sudden you have to pull it back, that really makes it that much more challenging. So I'm glad you addressed that. And if we do bring in a centralized number, it would really have to be clean and cold running. We'd have to run that as much as possible. It's my little 2 cents. So I'm going to bring up something that's probably the elephant in the room. I think I understand why we don't have this service, but we got, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people asking us about clearing of the windrows. I know that, sidewalks are a challenge and people would then talk about pedestrian crosswalks and paths, all these little things as the days progress. They said, oh, you haven't done that path yet. But the windrows from moment one to the very end, people were so mad about. And then there's everyone suggesting that there's this little arm on the existing plows that can just clear the windrows. I know in the past we looked at a windrow clearing. So I'll let you speak to that and what you think about maybe thinking about that again. And does Toronto, do you know that? And if you don't, it's okay, but does Toronto remove the snow at the end of the driveways? Do other municipalities do it? Is there something we can point to and say, oh, they do it, the St. Catharines do it, Vaughan? Thank you. I'll let you speak.
So just a couple of things. Yes, you're correct with respect to the city of Toronto. And you're also correct in that during this term of council, there was a report detailing the feasibility of clearing windrows at the end of streets. Staff did considerable groundwork, provided a cost, and brought a report forward to council, which was not supported by council. I have no intention on bringing it back.
Okay, but you're saying Toronto does have a windrow removal program?
I believe they've pretty much always had that service, from what I understand. It's sort of it's something that they provided, but I can say that the majority of municipalities do not offer the windrow service. Again, I believe there is information provided within the staff report that was presented to council a couple of years ago.
So Dr. Meredith, I'm just going to put a pause here. CEO Baker, I think you wanted to comment on this.
Through Mr. Chair, I have reported on windrows multiple times in my years of experience, and can tell you that the last information I had when we were doing benchmarking regarding the city of Toronto was when, before they amalgamated, the municipalities of the former Metro Toronto that did do windrows, and I believe it was only the city of Scarborough, continued to plow windrows after they were amalgamated. But and so Toronto City Council asked for a report to come forward as to what it would take or cost to be able to provide that service citywide, because obviously even within the city of Toronto, people were complaining that Scarborough gets it, but Etobicoke doesn't get it. And the cost was just astronomical, and the city council decided not to do it. But one of the issues that we absolutely found, because I believe Vaughan does provide windrow service, in the discussions that we had with them, there were all kinds of issues with residents' levels of expectation as to what it actually meant. They thought, the residents thought that it would totally clear the windrow, where in actual fact, all it did was clear enough snow just so that a car could get out. The residents still had to shovel a large portion of the windrow. So they still got massive amounts of complaints. There were equipment failures and so on. But the one thing that we kept hearing is once you implement the service, you'll never get rid of it. And that's why it's in my view that City of Scarborough still has it, or the former City of Scarborough.
Right. So the east end of the GTA, or of Toronto. Okay, I mean, I'm asking that question because I know a lot of people asked us that question. I know there's no clear and concise and easy answer. I also know what the report said and how expensive it would be. Okay, I guess we'll just leave that, but it was a challenging week. And again, thank you so much to all the residents that were patient and kind of helped out with us, and to your staff. It was tough, and everybody stayed professional and patient. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler Moore and Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Director Meredith, for this very informative presentation. We need to know this stuff. We need to learn this stuff. So I appreciate the time that went into this. And again, I'll echo what everyone says. Town staff did an amazing job under a lot of pressure and a lot of frustration. So thank you for that. What I heard a lot from Ward 3 residents was about the seniors snow removal program, and that was a big challenge. I think communication was what the biggest comment was that although the participants knew that they had to wait till the clearing was done, a lot of comments about we didn't know when they were coming or what to expect, how long it would take. So can you tell me what the communication plan currently is with that senior snow removal program, or is there any kind of training for participants, or when are they contacted, how often, etc.? And I know this was an extraordinary circumstance, but in a normal winter.
So in a normal winter, I know our administrative staff, our CSRs do proactively communicate with the seniors. They have distribution lists, they have information set up in terms of when service is being initiated, the generally expected timelines for service delivery. With respect to this event, so they will proactively reach out and communicate to those that are on the list. And I think this year there's 328. This particular event was difficult to predict timelines. So and I think I mentioned that it was well in excess of a week that it took to get around to a number of the locations that were providing support to, or that had registered with the senior snow removal program. So as we were getting trails and sidewalks in better shape and finding resources or having the ability to reallocate resources, we would reallocate them to the senior snow program. So right now it's supported by 6 part-time staff that supports the senior snow removal program. So it's not a lot. And I know through our service delivery review that we're doing within operations and environmental services, senior snow is an area that we are looking at in terms of the timing to initiate it, the resources required to deliver it better, and sort of what that would look like. So it's one of a few services that we need to look at through the budget process, and if appropriate, identify through a business case through the annual budget process. So that's typically the way that it would feed. So it is on our radar where it fits in terms of the grand scheme of all of the services that we deliver. I'm not certain. I know there is the potential, again, from a staff perspective, to revisit the level of service that we provide. I know, and I'm not sure with this council, or I know we have with previous council, many municipalities will deal with the public part of an individual's property, so the sidewalk and the windrow, whereas our service goes beyond that, includes full driveway and walkways to the front door. So that's not something that is typical, and there is an element of risk for town staff on private property to deliver that service. It's not something that is necessarily ideal, but if the level of service change, then we may be able to deliver it to a higher degree. But again, not a discussion for now. It's just part of a conversation that may need to take place at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Do you expect that conversation will take place before the next winter season?
I would like to think that we will. We've got a number of recommendations, and I'm working with the CAO as a follow-up to our core services review on an implementation plan and what are our priorities in terms of identifying business cases for the 2023 budget. So it'll be part of the conversation over the course of the summer and into the fall for next winter.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. That's it for me right now, Chair. Thank you.
sorry, I'm back now. Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been answered. I just had the question about private contractors. Were they having the same issues of being able to remove snow, on people's driveways in a timely manner? Do you know if there were issues there, Dave?
I don't know. I know our contractors and they were very good in terms of supporting the services that we contract with them, but I wouldn't have a feel for any private contractors and how they were able to deliver a service to individuals.
Okay. And just a comment, when I got up that morning, I couldn't even see where the road would have been or should have been. It was very pretty. But also I think, it was a lesson for many people who did venture out into that snow, because there was, the weather on the news was telling you, do not go out. It's a major storm event, and they knew it was coming a few days ahead. So I went out and got what I needed from the grocery store just in case. But, when people ventured out, there was just no way that they could get a car or a truck through that snow. And I think that delayed operations quite a bit. So I know how challenging it was for you. And I know people were very impatient, but it was what it was. There was nothing really we could do except remove it as quickly as we could. So my advice, what I learned, the snow blower that I had on my list to buy this year and didn't is definitely on my list for next year, so that I can remove the windrow. But I have great neighbors who had snow blowers, and they were out there helping everybody. So if you have a snow blower, help your neighbors. So thank you to you and your crew, Mr. Meredith, for all you did during the storm.
I think the chair froze. Oh.
Chair froze.
Councillor Khan, did you want to speak on this?
Yes, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just gonna read this because it popped up on my social media memories this morning. On Thursday, March 28, 2019, Ajax to examine offering service to remove snow after the snow plow goes by. And it says, Ward 2 local councillor, whoever that is, presented a motion at the council meeting on Monday, March 25th, asking that staff look into providing the service. Part of the investigation will be the cost to provide the service. And when that motion did come back, we had no appetite for it when we saw the price tag associated with removing windrows. So that was exactly 3 years ago. Moving forward, Director Meredith, I mean, the presentation was great, but I was locked in with the 4 videos. I mean, that's all you had to show me. And if we can share that with our residents and see the challenges that you guys and our staff go through, I think, people would be a lot more sympathetic and maybe a little more helpful in understanding the challenges you do go through. Throughout all this, what I've learned, I think it's either through you, Dave, Mr. Director Meredith, or Director Romanowski. And when we were having hiccups in the north, and we were getting compared again to the south, because the south did not have many hiccups with the plows, it was related to me that, when the South Ajax was being created and built, it was more generous with the amount of land offered to build the houses and the roads and the driveways. Unlike coming up north, when the land is limited, we try to compact everything. And you can bet every time there is a development, Regional Council Lee would always ask the first thing, what does Sterling ask for? The snow removal process. Always bring that up. And it's something that I hope moving forward, we can bear this into consideration. I know we don't have much more land, but things are going to be built. And just to help along with our staff and our snow plow drivers and the snow removal crew, I hope we can really remember this. Maybe make a note. This is something that we have to take seriously up in the new developments. So, but again, I just want to reiterate what all my colleagues said. Thank you so much. It was a great experience. It was frustrating, but a lot of residents came out and met each other and did that support thing and got closer, which is something that we all needed through this pandemic. So excellent job. And this was a detailed presentation, but those 4 videos really resonated with me. So thank you, Director, and thank you for hearing me out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I may have to go on my phone at one point, so Regional Councilor Crawford, be on standby. But just very quickly in terms of comments, if council's done, I think the only takeaway I have is that it's important to over communicate in non-ideal situations or extreme situations. And I think we didn't over communicate. So even like the very principle of us having 17 plow routes, it's not something I knew before the snow event. And, you know, if things are going as planned, no one ever panics. If I tell a resident, this plow will be here within 48 hours, they're going to be fine, no problem. It's when it doesn't come in the 48th hour that people start having anxiety and stress and start, you know, calling the lines. So I think, like, for example, next time I would love to see a situation where, you know, we broadcast to all our distribution lists. We broadcast on our social media. We have a special dedicated webpage that just exclusively gives information of, hey, the trucks are here now. And I know like Plow Maps is supposed to do that, but obviously there was a gap with our Plow Maps. And I just, on that quick question there, was the Plow Map issue an issue with the GPS or the website, or both?
I think the app is not as sophisticated as what we will be getting with the new system that we're acquiring. So I would say it was both. It was in part the infrastructure of the app and how it's built and set up, and then the GPS technology as well.
Because if I'm not mistaken, we spent quite a bit of money on that app, and it's like problematic to find out that it didn't act the way we had expected it to act. And so much so, just like, did we contact the vendor and ask for some sort of compensation after the fact of just like, you guys, yes, on the GPS side, if we didn't do something, that's on us. But if there's any side on the web, then that's on them to a degree or whatever. I think my next question is also, so that's that. My next statement is, you had mentioned a few times, Sundial, the design in newer subdivisions. We are hearing constantly about intensification and infill and how we're going to start, being more smarter with the way we're building, but that also means we're going to have more people in a smaller amount of area. So I guess this is just a point of note to our, planners of just, these are questions we should be, I hope we are asking in future subdivisions is, do we have somewhere to put the snow in the event of a snow event? Because like Regional Councilor Crawford said, like Councilor Bauer said when she moved this report back then, and I said, and everyone said, this is gonna keep happening. And I don't want us to be like, oh man, like we're shocked again, because this really should be a learning experience for us, and we should be aiming towards handling these type of events every single time. And if we get less snow, then we are absolutely ahead of the game. My very last question was, is it possible, and I think Regional Councilor Crawford kind of alluded to this, that we can actually miss an entire street? Because we heard from Councilor Connor, I heard the residents that Dooley Crescent, for example, was like never plowed. Now, I don't know if that's hyperbole or not, but is there a possibility that actually a street could never get plowed?
It's possible. I can't say that.
I guess anything's possible in the world, right?
What I would say is that's where a lot of our reliance on the GPS technology really comes into play, because we can verify sort of where our vehicles are when they went by. There have been situations where they're the first street that the plow goes to at the beginning of an event, and a couple hours later it doesn't look like a plow. I'm not saying that was the case here, but I'm just saying there are situations, and every situation is unique, and you'd have to dig into a little more deeply. So in a situation where there is a one-off street that is entirely missed, it's something that we would follow up. I would follow up with the manager and supervisor, who would follow up with the operator who has, who's in the seat of that route. So we know who's dedicated to each particular area. Is it possible that it could have happened at a shift change where staff are out there working, they come back, there's a new staff member that goes in to continue on with the shift? It's possible, and a street gets missed in that case. You don't always have the same driver in the same route, so their familiarity with the route may not be as an experienced operator in that route would be. So there's a number of variables and factors that could come into play that would lead to how a street could be missed. So, but by all means, if that is the case, if we're aware, we will follow up. And I think in most situations over the course of this event that we did respond to the inquiries that we received.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were a number, and it did take considerable time in certain situations. We do track that.
Yeah, you and your team were absolutely great with that. So I guess like if I were to emphasize one thing, it's let us over communicate, whether it's council at our ward meetings, whether it's our comms team with just like infographics, videos, reminding people about windrows, reminding about their responsibility. I think it's something we should do for the next winter. And I don't think anyone's ever going to complain that, oh, you guys are giving us too much information about snow. I think they will be thankful for it, in fact. So that's my final kind of comment.
I think our communication that we want to go down is definitely more, I'm not going to say interactive, but it's more visual. It's not just literature that you distribute and expect people to read. It's similar to what we did with the Rec and Parks Master Plan, the presentation on Monday. Like there's different devices and different ways that we can convey information that makes it more interesting, that will hopefully engage and resonate with residents a little bit more than perhaps the way we have in the past.
Sounds good. So it looks like it's under your radar already. So again, Mr. Meredith, thank you again to your team. Freak snow event, let's take what we learned and, apply it for the next winter. Does anybody else have any kind of questions or comments for the Director of Operations? Then we will move on. Thank you again. So moving on then, we are on item 6, correspondence. Mayor Collier has pulled items 4, 7, 8, 9. Are there any other pulls from council? Then moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Councillor Bauer. On the balance, any questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? And that is good. So Mayor Collier, you wanted to pull, I guess 4, 8, 9 is dealing with the same thing, and then 7 is separately. Mayor Collier, are you there? Might have to be probably muting. So through myself to the clerk, if the mayor is unable to be able to proceed.
Mr. Chair, if you like at this time, you could adopt the motion for the balance and we can return to the items that were pulled. If the mayor is able to participate later on, and we can move on with the agenda.
Sure, we'll do that. So Mayor Collier, I see your text me saying you're here and you want to move to endorse, but I think you actually have to do that. So we will leave the balance for now and move on to reports, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, so we're on 7.2. It's the GGC report moved by Councillor Bauer, seconded by Councillor Tyler Moran, that the General Government Committee report dated March 21st, 2022 be adopted. Any questions or comments from council? Move to vote then. All in favor? Opposed? And that passes. 7.3 is the summary of advisory committee activities, moved by Regional Councillor Dyes, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford, that the summary of advisory committee activities report dated March 28, 2022, as attached to the meeting agenda be received for information, and that the recommendations contained therein be referred to staff where applicable. Any questions or comments from council? Call to vote then. All in favor? Opposed? That passes. 7.4.1 departmental reports, CAO 2022-04 contract award for core service reviews, moved by Councillor Bauer, seconded by, we'll call it Councillor Tyler Moran, that council award the contract for the core service reviews to Grant Thornton LLP in the amount of $294,884.80, inclusive of all taxes. Any questions or comments from council? Fantastic. Call to vote then. All in favor? Opposed, and that passes. 7.4.2 CAO 2022-05 partnership with Computech College and Execution Skills Development Fund Transfer Payment Agreement. Moved by, we'll call
Councillor Lee,
it.
I am back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Very good timing, Mayor Collier. We're on 7.4.2, the Computech College. So moved by Mayor Collier, seconded by Councillor Khan, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a transfer payment agreement with the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development for a one-year partnership with Computech College through the Skills Development Fund grant program. The Chief Administration Officer be authorized to execute a memorandum of understanding with Computech College to formalize the terms of the partnership and to meet the obligations of the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills of Development. Mayor Collier, did you want to speak on this?
I would, thank you, Chair. And my apologies, I was trying desperately to unmute on the phone and it wasn't working, so I've logged back onto the Zoom meeting. I'm so glad to see this coming forward. Myself and I think a number of my colleagues here all ran on trying to attract some form of college university campus to the town. We understand the economic benefits of such an item, and we've been working hard with staff, with Murali and his team from Computech College for quite some time, to help them get the grants and everything they need to be able to put together and bring this to Ajax and provide this very valuable service. We have over 444 long-term care beds new in Ajax, and we're really lacking the PSWs that we need in order for these to be able to be staffed properly and to be able to train, especially train new immigrants to Canada to serve these roles and really benefit our community and our seniors is an amazing thing. And I just wanted to just say that thank you to staff that's been working so hard to make this happen. We are very hopeful that the grant funding will come forward in the amount of $1.8 million from the province, and we'll be able to make this a reality and start this training center right here in Ajax. It's something I think we should all be very proud of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. So any questions, comments from the rest of council? Call to vote then. All in favor? Opposed? Mayor Collier, if you oppose, just say oppose. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you're in favor.
I'm in favor. Thank you.
Yeah, I figured that one. So we've already actioned items 7.4.3 and 7.4.4 with the presentations. We'll actually go back to correspondence then, Chair, since we have Mayor Collier here. Mayor Collier, did you want to speak on 487 and 4789?
Yes, Chair, and we'll deal with those together. They are virtually the same, and that's the matter of endorsing the resolutions from other municipalities to disband the Ontario Land Tribunal. You've all heard me speak many times at planning meetings, at community affairs and planning meetings about some of these issues where we as a council are forced to make decisions as the elected officials representing municipalities, forced to make decisions that are actually, sorry, I want to move to endorse. I'll need a seconder.
So Mayor Collier needs a seconder. We have, I believe, Councillor Khan.
Okay, thank you.
And go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, no disrespect to our planners, but I think we can all agree the planning process is a bit of an onerous process at times. And we're in the middle of the municipal comprehensive review at the region, which takes about 5 years, and then it has to go through and be approved by the province, and our official plans of the region and the town are all approved by the province. And then we have the fact that this is a little bit open to abuse in some cases, and poster child for that, I think, is unfortunately our neighbors to the west appealing the Annandale development, which is a matter that has been in both the region and the town official plans since 2000, over 20 years. It's a conformity exercise, and to do an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal just to try and delay a development for over a year, and we end up having to go to an MZO to get this done, is a bit ridiculous. So I think taking the decision-making power away from those elected, making us make decisions that we wouldn't normally make because we know that we'll be overruled at the Ontario Land Tribunal, is as much cause as any to ask for this to be done. I am fine if the province wants to look at revamping this perhaps, but right now, it's basically, we are already operating under approvals granted by the province, and to have us second guess through this on things that aren't beneficial to our community is just not right. So I would ask that we endorse this. Thank you.
Councillor Khan, as the seconder, did you want to speak on this? Nope. Would any of the members of council like to speak, questions or comments? I'm going to just chime in then very quickly. And sorry, Thank you. This is actually in regards to 489. 7 is regarding hospital care funding. We'll deal with that right after this. So this is regarding 489. If the motion was to, the endorsement was to, change the OLT to the LPAT system that had previously served the town of Ajax well, I think I would have, supported that. But to completely get rid of it, I think there's a checks and balance system in regards to, whether it's resident protection or municipal protection. I think it doesn't hurt to have a third body, oversee. And yes, there are circumstances where it's abused, but I think as a whole, I think it's a legitimate body that is meant to protect, to have very strict protections to ensure that planning is done a very specific way. So to completely get rid of a body, I think we could go the extreme way as well, where abuses could be have had that way without an overseeing a third party. So I don't think I can support endorsement, though I understand the frustrations that the mayor has outlined. Would anyone else like to comment or question? Then I'll call to vote. Then all in favor of endorsing items 4, 8, 9 from correspondence, raise a hand. That is and Mayor Colliers, that's 4, and then opposed. And that is 3 opposed, but that does pass. Thank you. Mayor Collier, did you want to speak on number 7, the town of Brackenridge Hospital capital funding?
Bracebridge, you mean?
Oh, excuse me, Bracebridge. Did I say Brackenridge? I'm getting tired. That'd be look like a K. There's no such town as Brackenridge, I'm sure. Mayor Collier, are you there? Still there? Okay, then let's just move to receive item 7 for information. I guess, can I get a mover and a seconder for that? To just receive number 7, that was not. So I have Councillor Bauer, Regional Councillor Dyes. Any questions, comments? All in favor? And thank you, that passes. We'll move on then to, we finished departmental report, regional council reports. So are there any regional council reports? I believe Regional Councillor Crawford had one, please.
I do have a report, but in the interest of time, is anybody interested?
I am. Regional Councillor Crawford, I am.
Okay. Very, very quick overview. The Works Department, we had a report on the Blue Box transition. It's going to happen in 2024. Interestingly, they included in that the end use producers have decided that they're going to be picking up from schools, which Durham Region doesn't currently do, and not pick up from certain BIA areas, which is weird. So what the region is saying is that they're going to try to grandfather the BIAs or the businesses within the BIAs into their program. And then if in the end use producers decide that they're not going to continue to pick up recycling from those areas, Durham Region will take that on and hire a private contractor to make the businesses within the BIA are not left without service for recycling. The overall program, I believe, saves the Durham region over $5 million a year. So it is substantial savings going into this program. This has been talked about now for probably, well, my entire term, so at least 4 years. The end use producers knew that this was coming. I think they're starting to balk at it because it's going to cost them the equal amount of money. So, and trying to figure out how that all plays out. So I don't think they're as happy about it as we are. Secondly, transit, BRT was probably the only thing that we talked about at transit. And they're conducting a survey from March 7th to March 25th on the design of the shelters that are going to be put in along the Highway 2 corridor. This is going to happen and is going to happen faster than I think maybe we're all ready for. Harwood to Galea, the design tender is late 2022, which means construction will start as soon as that is decided. Galea to Alexander Crossing is in design mode now with construction at 2024. and Westney to Harwood. The design RFP is out there. Construction to start on 2025. And they are still working on the funding model for the village. So that will likely be out into the next term. So there is a link to the survey with your, I don't have it on me to be honest with you, but we can make sure if anyone is interested, there is a link to the survey and they're talking about the different shelters that are proposed. So that was at Transit. At Vision Zero, we had a wholesome discussion around distracted driving. And I actually asked a question at Regional Council around has distracted driving now taken over impaired driving charges? And so one of the police officers emailed me with the stats. In 2019, impaired driving charges were 797, distracted driving were 845. 2020, the impaired were 649, distracted driving was 749. And interesting, in 2021, impaired driving was 672 and distracted driving was 295. I guess there was a lot less traffic on the roads during that time. For 2021, impaired driving charges have been 133 and distracted driving charges have now crept up to 124. So indeed, it is equal, if not more, to impaired driving charges, and equally as deadly if you look at some of the other stats. I won't get into all the details on that. Very last thing was the Durham Region Roundtable Climate Change Table has issued, there's a subcommittee out there right now talking about the land use through the lens of climate control. And so we had our first kickoff meeting this afternoon, and we'll be having several more before our next roundtable meeting. So I'm just letting you know that that's happening. And I think that might be everything. Yes, I think that's everything that I had to say. I have a lot more to say, but because it's so late, I won't bore anybody with all of that.
Not boring at all, Regional Councillor Crawford, not boring at all. Anyone else have any updates for the Regional Council reports? Then moved by Regional Councillor Crawford, seconded by Regional Councillor Dyes, that the Regional Council reports of March 28, 22 be received for information. Questions, comments, call to vote then, all in favor? Opposed, and that passes. Very good then. So now we're at business arising from notice of motion. We have a motion to suspend the rules of procedure regarding 2/3 regarding traffic and safety impacts of school bell time changes. This is moved by Regional Councillor Dyes, seconded by Councillor Bauer, that the rules of procedure be suspended in order to introduce a motion without notice regarding traffic and safety impacts of school bell time changes. Any questions, comments? Call to vote then, all in favor of just suspending rules?
Yes.
Thank you. And that passes. That'll come as the third motion. So first, I'm going to hand over the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford as I am moving the next motion.
Okay, and we have a motion on the table moved by Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This is moved by myself, seconded by Mayor Collier. I'm just going to read the therefores. This is specifically twofold in regards to iGaming in casinos that the provinces seem to have embraced, as well as getting a status on our casino. So the resolutions are as follows: that number one, Ajax Council calls upon the provincial government to demonstrate that it has considered the risks of iGaming to the land-based gaming sector and provide certainty to operators and host communities that facility operations will not be negatively affected, and require that iGaming operations be Canadian owned and Canadian staffed. Two, Ajax Council recognizes Casino Ajax as a valued asset and requests an extension beyond the current 2026 lease expiry date. And three, this motion be circulated to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy, Finance Minister of Ontario, Honourable Doug Downey, Attorney General of Ontario, the Ajax Provincial Constituency Office, Scugog Council, Jim Warren, the Chair of OLG, Great Canadian Gaming Corporation, and Casino Ajax. And Chair, I'd like to just quickly speak on this, if that's possible.
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. So point 2 is a pretty much a no-brainer. The reason it's brought up now is that there is a provincial election coming up. And I do think it's something worth mentioning to the candidates that we very much expect the success of Ajax Casino to continue beyond just our current lease expiry date of 2026. The second one is more specific regarding to iGaming. I don't dismiss the notion that, cloud-based gaming is the wave of the future, but I don't understand why we would, these Canadian lottery dollars go towards the municipalities, both in terms of direct funding from the earnings, but it's also as well as jobs. And a lot of Canadians count on those jobs. And if the iGaming sites are being operated outside of Canada, or even Ontario, or in our case, even Ajax, I think that's very much counterintuitive to the goal of OLG of putting the funding and jobs within a host community, which we are one. So I very much appreciate council's support in just getting OLG to recognize the impacts and the successes of Ajax Casino, and to ensure that the iGaming model doesn't make us extinct by a certain time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Collier, if you're available, did you want to make a comment?
I am here, and my apologies. This seems to drop out at the worst times. Can you hear me? Okay, just to add, finally, Council Lee has spoken well on this. I just will simply add, this is also a kind of a pivotal year. This is the year where the decision is made whether we're going to be extending the casino in Ajax or not. And to have this come on, I just want to make sure that they have dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. We don't want any unintended consequences. I understand the province is, trying to do something sort of innovative, but if it means that municipalities like Ajax are going to suffer with lost revenues when we've already had a big hit to our revenues with the opening of the second casino just 3 kilometers away, is something that they really need to consider and weigh. And that's all we're really asking here. So I would ask for support of my colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments to this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that passes. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you. We now have item 9.2, endorse no urban expansion for community area in Durham. This is moved by Mayor Collier and Regional Councillor Dias. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the clerk to please just bring this down to the whereas, to the therefores, and again, we'll just focus on the operatives here. Just that Ajax Council supports no urban expansion into farmland for residential purposes in Durham Region's MCR process up to 2051. The Ajax Council strongly recommends that the Brothers Creek headwaters be protected and not considered for urban expansion under Durham Region's MCR due to the ecological sensitivity of the area and significant flood and erosion risk posed to Ajax. And that we direct planning and development service staff to prepare a report on the region's land needs scenarios assessment summary report for the April 4th, 2022 CAP meeting with their recommendations. And Ajax Council directs corporate communications to promote the opportunity for the public to complete the region's alternative land needs scenario survey by April 14th, and the motion be circulated to Honorable Mark Holland, MP for Ajax candidates running in the upcoming provincial election, all Durham municipalities, Environment Action Now, Environment Defense, Stop Urban Sprawl, and ask for their support. And I'm getting the internet unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think we did miss one, just the province, I believe, has to be notified on this as well on item 5. So I think we should add that. I'll just speak to it very quickly because I may lose my connection, but this is nothing new to Ajax. You've heard me speaking at this at the region many times. The region proposal is to actually decrease density, and that's not the direction we want to go. Many of our other municipalities in Ontario, like Burlington, like Oakville, like Hamilton, have passed these resolutions to have no urban boundary expansion, to use the boundaries of the urban lands that we have, increase the density, and make better use of the lands that we already have and prevent sprawl. And that's what we're asking to do here. The current proposal put forward by the at the MCR process is looking to expand the urban boundary by 2,800 acres, I believe, the urban settlement area, and looking to reduce the density. And that is the wrong direction. We want to send the message to increase the density to 60 plus jobs and people per hectare. We've shown that can be done. The Annandale warehouse, the Amazon warehouse itself has shown with over 1,800 people working there that we can achieve 112 jobs per net hectare. So why are we at the region through this MCR process looking at going the other direction? It makes no sense. It's something that we need to have stopped, and I'd ask for all council support and recorded vote on this, please. Thank you.
A record vote has been requested. Regional Councilor Dies, before you speak as a seconder. Mayor Collier, is a friendly, will you accept specifically on the last point to actually copy Premier Doug Ford, Minister Steve Clark, Durham Environmental Advisory Committee, Durham Region Roundtable on Climate Change Committee, Durham Food Policy Council, and the Climate Justice Durham? Would you accept that as a friendly?
I think that's what I said.
Just want to make sure. And Regional Councilor Dies as the seconder, will you accept that as a friendly?
Yes, I will.
And then after you, because I believe you want to speak on this as well.
Yes, thank you. You know, this is a really big issue, and there's a lot of discussion around the province about this. And it's one that I'm very interested in and have been for some time. You know, continuing to build low density housing, which we are used to in the suburbs as single homes, is urban sprawl. That's what it's called. And it's expensive. It costs us a lot of money as municipalities to build that infrastructure and maintain. It's becoming unaffordable to the taxpayers in the suburbs and here in Ajax as well. It requires a great deal of land. And so in order to build this low density housing, which is an option at the region, you are going to have to build beyond your urban boundaries, which means on your agricultural lands. And I think those are pretty important lands as their prime one agricultural soil. You don't find them everywhere. We're very lucky to have it. And, you know, as you see the impacts of climate change, we're going to be having droughts in our out west, and here in Canada, the Midwest, down in the States, and other countries around the world. So you need to hang on to those if you want to feed some people and as climate change goes on. It also is going to impact your natural heritage system and your environmental green space. Once you start to develop in sensitive areas such as the headwaters of the creek, you will see that there are major impacts downstream. And as we know, 77% increase of flooding is one of those impacts. This land will be looked at. It has to be what we call, it's leapfrogging, and the infrastructure, the sewer, will have to go through the green belt to actually get to those lands. So it's kind of dead infrastructure. Nobody's using it, nobody's paying for it at the same time. We're trying to preserve our green spaces because they do a lot of work for us as a municipality for nothing. They mitigate flooding, they clean our water, they clean our air. And these are things that cost us a lot of money to do in other ways. And as an example, I always point to this, how in flood prone areas, there is such a high risk of mitigation and there's a high cost attached to that, which the developers will be responsible for in the beginning. But as that mitigation starts to wear down, it needs to be maintained and replaced. And I always sort of pull out this example of a flood-prone creek in Toronto, where in just one part of this creek, they looked at mitigation measures for infrastructure and municipal infrastructure, and the cost was $57 million. And I point this out because I know it's like apples and oranges, and that rivers or creeks are different, but the cost of infrastructure is huge. That just sort of, it just blew my mind when I saw it on the page, because it's borne on the cost of the property taxpayers. And, you know, things age, things start to deteriorate. We always have new technology. We always think it's the best, but we don't know what the future will bring. And with climate change, we're seeing increased levels in our creeks and rivers that are causing some of this infrastructure to fail. So I think for me, you know, of course I support this. No growing beyond the urban boundaries, because we have been giving a 30-year time frame to make a decision in a time where things are very unpredictable. We've just gone through 2 years of COVID. We're coming out of it with different economic conditions, hybrid working models. We're still not sure what's going to happen once, you know, once we start to go into the spring and into the fall again. So there's a lot of, you know, the economy has gone kind of crazy where, you know, there's an increase in housing costs and food costs and gas costs and everything, and a shortage of supplies. So you're asking me to make a decision at the region to 2051 when we really don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years here. We don't have to make that decision now, because as municipalities, we review our official plans every year and we look at these same issues. So I'm confident that if there is something that needs to be addressed in that time frame, it can be done so. You know, a changing economy, it is going to change things in the very near future. It was only 2 years, the 2 years of COVID that we went through, we saw change that we never ever thought we would experience. So we have that opportunity to 5 years to review it, and I think that's a good thing. But I think there's also work to do. I think we can do a better job at properly having that conversation with our residents about what planning is. What are the rules? What can we do? What can't we do? What's intensification? What does it look like? What does it look like in various neighborhoods? I think that that dialogue will be the key to successful future planning. So I had to say all those things. Like I said, it's near and dear to me, and we've been working on these issues for a long time. And I think this motion is really, really important. And I appreciate your support on this and letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other member of council like to speak on this? I think Regional Councillor Dye covered most of it. We will call to vote then. I believe there is a recorded vote that was requested. Clerk?
Thank you. On the motion, in favor or opposed, Mayor Collier?
In favor.
Okay. Councillor Crawford?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dye?
In favor.
Councillor Khan?
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Morin?
In favor.
Councillor Bauer?
In favor.
And Deputy Mayor Lee?
Emphatic in favor. I think that passes. Clerk, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Council. We will move on to the next item, which is traffic and safety impacts of school bell time changes. This is moved by Regional Councillor Dye. I believe it's seconded by Councillor Bauer.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes.
And after you then, Regional Councillor Dye.
Thank you very much. It's pretty self-explanatory. We did have an indication that there would be bell time changes at Pickering High School and St. Bernadette's, which are next door to each other, on Bailey, just near the intersection of Harwood. So unfortunately, these bell times will now be only 5 minutes apart, which means you've got about 1,900 students coming out at the same time, basically trying to get out with cars and buses and everything else onto the street. And this is basically to request that the committee that looks at this for the school boards reviews this. Even if it changes 15 minutes in time would make a huge difference. It's at a peak time too, because they're coming out at 3:25 and 3:30. So it's a busy intersection. There's a lot happening there. It needs to be reviewed, and we'd appreciate that this committee and school boards have a look at that, because it is a safety zone that we've been working on for some time. It's community safety zone, and this will exacerbate all of the things we put in place to improve the safety. So we'd appreciate they have a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer, as the seconder, would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Chair. I think Regional Councillor Dye said it all. This is a busy area anyway, at any time. And I think it's just a dangerous idea to have dismissal time so close together with that many kids in a very busy area. So it makes sense that we would ask for that to not happen, or for reconsideration of different times. So thank you for supporting this motion, and I hope that you will. That's it.
Thank you. Would any other members of council like to speak or questions? Regional Councilor Crawford?
Yeah, I just want to say that it is important to get in on this before the decision is made, because we had the same decision happen over on Church Street, it's a 2-lane road. Pickering High School, Lincoln Alexander, 5 years ago, have the exact same dismissal time. It is bedlam between for an hour before it, an hour after, an hour in the afternoon. It is absolute bedlam, and it just cannot happen. And so you really need to get in ahead of the game on this one, and just, you know, I support this 100%. We've lived through it. In this particular change now, Pickering and Lincoln Alexander are separated by 15 minutes. Go figure. Anyway, so but no, I support this 100%.
Thank you. Would any other members of council like to speak? Questions, comments? I will call to vote then. All in favor? And opposed? And that passes.
Thank
We
you.
are now, thank you. We're on to item 10, bylaws. We have an additional motion to suspend the rules of procedure, requires a 2/3, to introduce bylaw number 27, 2022, being a bylaw to repeal bylaw 08/2020, which is actually the delegated authorities related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The motion to suspend is moved by Councillor Tyler Moran, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Oh, question. Oh, sorry, no, you guys were voting. So all in favor?
No,
Oh, you had a question.
I
Sorry,
have a
yeah,
question
Regional Councillor
about-
Crawford.
Can I ask a question about this bylaw being repealed?
Of course.
I'm just curious, did one of the things that Elaine Baxter Traher mentioned to me was the reason why we were staying in the state of emergency was because they were making sure that they had the funding that they needed necessary for, because they were still redeploying staff out to vaccination centers and PPE and all this stuff. So can you confirm or deny whether or not that funding was realized, and is it no longer relevant, or what's the deal with this?
CAO Baker, actually, I'm gonna just, Marilyn, this is actually just a rules of procedure, the first vote. The report's coming up in 2. Do you mind just waiting till then till we get to that? This is just a motion to suspend.
Oh, okay. my bad.
I just want to deal with that first, if you don't mind. So,
Yeah.
to suspend, all in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we're not quite there, Marilyn. It's bylaw numbers 16, 2022 to 25, 2022 to be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Regional Councillor Dies. Any questions, comments? All in favor? And that passes. Now, so Marilyn, moved by Councillor Bauer, seconded by Councillor Tyler Moran. Bylaw number 27, 2022, repeal of 08/2020, delegated authorities for COVID-19. We read a first, second, and third time and passed. Regional Councillor Crawford, I assume your question still applies, and we'll shoot to CAO Baker.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We had a discussion about this. I've mentioned to you before that the CAOs meet weekly regarding, you know, the different phases of COVID and all the different decisions we have to make. And over the last 2 or 3 weeks, this topic of lifting the declaration of emergency was one of our discussion points. And yes, those questions came up regarding the funding, because that's something that the regional CAO had mentioned numerous times. She said that she came back and said that her staff had looked at all of the HR applications and the funding applications and so on, and said that it was time to lift the order. So I assume that because your question was related more to the regional services that were provided, like the vaccine centers and so on. So I assume that that they were able to get all the funding that they required.
Okay, just may I ask another question?
Of course.
What does this mean now in Ajax? So this is now all been lifted at the Durham region. It's now being lifted throughout the municipalities. Does it, what changes now? I think I know, I'm talking public wise. What is the public, like, what changes?
So Through you, Mr. Chair. So in my view, we are going to continue meeting as a municipal emergency control group. One of the things that all of the different mayors mentioned this morning when they had an opportunity to speak as they were agreeing to lift their declared emergencies was that we're not quite out of it yet. There's still, evidence being seen in the wastewater and so on. So we have to be vigilant. So the MECG, although our meetings are now, maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes talking about, what we're seeing, what is in the news and so on, and if we need to make any decisions, I think that we need to continue on with that. We don't need to be in a state of emergency to be doing that. It's basically just getting all the department heads together, communications, HR, and so on, getting all of us in a room together to discuss what we need to be doing from a policy perspective. But as far as the state of emergency goes, it was more related to the delegated authorities that were given to the CAO and to the mayor. Mainly for me was the opening and closing of centers. So, anything related to changes to levels of service. So if the province said, we weren't allowed to have community centers open anymore, then instead of me having to go to council to say, okay, we need to, recommendation is that we close all our community centers, we just did it because it was something the province was telling us to do. It just saved us a lot of time, saved council a lot of time. So because of the position that we're in now and everything seems to be opening up, that doesn't seem to, hopefully, doesn't seem to be something that we'll be dealing with in the future. But obviously, if something changes and there are decisions that need to be made that affect levels of service, I'll have to come to council with those recommendations.
So would they be recommendations from the MECG group?
Well, as I'm the director of the MECG, and I think that no, the recommendations would come from me because they would be related to changes we would discuss them at the MECG. We would determine whether or not this is something that should go forward to council, something that should be done, but I would no longer have the delegated authority to make that decision.
Right. Because as far as operational goes, I mean, council doesn't get involved in the day-to-day operations of the town anyway. That is your authority, right?
But not changes to levels of service.
So changes to level of service, that is the only thing that would be coming to council, not the day-to-day kind of operational things.
Well, exactly. And the day-to-day operational things were never discussed. That wasn't something that was discussed at MECG because that was my authority.
Okay. No, that's great. I just wanted to understand what does it look like now? So I knew what it looked like before, so I just want to know what it looked like now. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the members of council have any questions or comments regarding this? Then I'll call to vote then. All in favor? Very good. That passes. I believe we're on item 11, notice of motion. Do any members of council have any notice of motion they wish to give a little sneak peek on? No, we will move on to new business and announcements. Councillor Khan, followed by Councillor Tyler Moore and Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proud to announce to the world that Ajax this week has launched its Black-owned business directory. There's about 70 businesses launched and being advertised on this, and this group really needs the help. And I looked into it, and great way for them to network, and we all can support our residents. As one, two, Sunday coming the 3rd of April will be the first day of Ramadan, my favorite time of the year. This is where we refrain from eating, drinking, and physical intimacy with one's spouses from sunrise to sunset. It's the month where we try to connect with our piety and reset our minds and our souls, and we pray all night, pretty much. This is the month we're supposed to read our Quran, the entire book. This month, this year, I choose to read my Quran, but I also want to study and get myself educated with our Jewish community. I want to use that because we're not supposed to be looking at TV and other stuff that's distracting. I will be focusing on my Quran and the Jewish society, get myself educated, which segues into May. So the beginning of May will be Eid, like 2nd or 3rd of May will be Eid, the end of Ramadan. But May, we will be declaring in Ajax Jewish Heritage Month, where we will be celebrating our Jewish brothers and sisters, and we'll educate ourselves about that. You know, Islamophobia is a big thing, but anti-Semitism is bigger than Islamophobia. The highest rates are attacks on the Jews in Canada. And, you know, Ajax will once again take the lead in supporting and have concrete measures in protecting and supporting our Jewish brothers and sisters. So that's my whole religious spiel for new businesses for April and May. So the next time you see me, I'll be 15 pounds lighter. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I believe we're going to weigh you in the day before Ramadan, and we'll see if you get to the 15. Councillor Tyler Morin.
In favor of that, Chair. Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford and I have our Ward 1 community meeting, as we have throughout this council term. The next one is on Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. We have a plethora of matters and topics that we talk about. For this particular meeting, we have Durham Regional Police joining us, and we will be addressing the topic of human trafficking, which is very challenging, very serious, but it's important that we talk about it. So thank you in advance to our DRP brothers and sisters for coming to join us and talking to our community about that. Also, on a bit of a lighter note, I'd like to mention a couple of teams, a lot of the hockey teams in Ajax, their seasons are coming to the end, and playoff champions, the 2021 U22 AA Elite League. These girls won their entire playoff championships, and now they're off to the provincials. So we wish them all the very best. And I want to mention the Ajax Pickering Raiders AAA U18 Hockey Club very quickly, Chair. These young men, coaching staff, and all their families deserve a huge congratulations on a truly remarkable, incredible season. They have so much to be proud of, finishing their season first overall, not only in their league, but in all of Canada. They also set Raiders history with the most wins ever in a season by a team. Their season has come to an end at this point, and many of the players will be moving on to Junior A and OHL clubs in the fall. So wishing the boys, their families, and coaching staff the very best in their next chapters. And thank you for letting me get that in. It was a huge season for them, and they represent our town very well. Thank you. Is the chair?
I'm back. I'm sorry, Councillor Bauer, very quickly before I drop off again.
Thank you, Chair. Just a reminder to anyone who might still be watching, Wednesday, March the 30th at 7 p.m. Joanne and I are hosting our Ward 3 meeting. It is on Zoom. Registration is required at ajax.ca/ward. Hope to see lots of residents there. Looking forward to meeting with you. Thank you. Wednesday, 7 p.m.
Okay. Regent Councillor.
Yeah, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. On April the 24th, that's a Sunday at 2:30 in the afternoon, the Pickering Community Concert Band will be holding their first concert since they've got back from COVID. So they're having fun rehearsing for this, and it will be a fundraiser for the Ukraine. So we hope that you will come and support us. The church has very generously given the space for free, and all the proceeds will go to the Ukraine. So please join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of council with announcements or new business? I have one very quickly. It's somebody's birthday on April 7th. Someone's turning 60, I'm told. And I believe that person is our very own Regional Councillor Crawford. Don't be fooled by the age, though. She will outbench any of us combined. So happy birthday, Marilyn, at the appropriate time.
You. I hope everyone's going to bed.
Yes. So let's go into the confirming bylaw. Bylaw number 26/2022 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ajax at its meeting held on March 28, 2022. Be read a first, second, third time and passed. Moved by Regional Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Tyler Morin. All in favor? And before I get cut off, adjournment moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Councillor Bauer. Any questions, comments? All in favor? You've been a great audience. Have a fantastic evening, everyone.